Chapter 464, Not Fair, Heavens. Not Fair. When Lu Ye's group had finally returned to Bailandia, the entire city had entered a battle-ready state. Each section of the wall was guarded by countless cultivators, and ward cultivators were setting up all sorts of wards outside the city as well. Bailandia was the human race's final bastion in the myriad beasts domain. If it fell, then no one was safe, and the world would fall under the control of the crazed spirit beasts completely. All the survivors had already reached Bailandia, and those who did not make it were most likely lost to the spirit beasts already. Lu Yi and his companions had just fought a great battle. Naturally, they were going to catch some rest. If they participated in the battle in their depleted state, there was a high chance they would not be able to last the whole fight. There was a surprise waiting for them, however. When they arrived at their accommodation, they discovered that a dozen or so strangers had moved into their house. Xia Qianqian and the girls immediately turned wary. Bailandia was so overcrowded that countless cultivators and mortals had to sleep on the streets. It would be terrible if someone had robbed them of their homes while they were out, especially considering the massive gift they had paid to the city lord to make it happen. Lu Yi thought differently though. A moment of hesitation later, he openly approached the unfamiliar group. If I'm not mistaken, they should be. As Lu Yi predicted, one of the cultivators in the group, an old man, broke into tears when he saw him. He immediately ran up to him, grabbed his shoulders and cried out, "Are you okay, young master?" What? Xia Qianqian and the rest of the girls immediately figured out who these people were after catching his outburst. There was only one type of people who would address Lu Yi as young master, and they were the cultivators of the myriad beasts sect. The girls were surprised because they didn't think that some of the natives would be their natural allies, but Lu Yi did because of his identity. He would not have approached them if he hadn't realized this. When he first entered the hidden realm, the objective he received was to escape to Bailandia with the thumb ring and by the survivors of the myriad beasts sect a place in the city. In fact, Lu Yi knew that the survivors of the myriad beasts sect had spread out after their headquarters was destroyed. His group could not be the only one who had escaped the disaster. Since these people were waiting for him at his detached house, they could only be the survivors of the myriad beasts sect. The group numbered a dozen or so people, and they were all Cloud River Realm cultivators. Considering the average power level of the myriad beast domain, they were without a doubt a force to be reckoned with. This was especially true for the old man holding Lu Yi and the old woman standing at the back of the group. If he wasn't mistaken, they were both 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators. "I'm fine," Lu Yi assured while nodding his head. The old man looked Lu Yi up and down until he was sure that Lu Yi was unhurt. However, his relieved expression quickly morphed into anger as he yelled, "Damn that Lu Wuxia! Our sect had just been destroyed, and that old bastard already sent you out to face against the spirit beasts? He must have been hoping that you would die out there. I cannot imagine how the bastard ever became the lord of Bailandia considering how short-sighted he is." Lu Wuxia was the name of the city lord of Bailandia. Clearly, the old man had many things to say about the city lord's decision to send Lu Yi out to danger. In fact, he immediately turned on the girls next and yelled, "Are you girls stupid or what? Whatever possessed you to think that putting the young master at risk is a good idea?" The girls were incredibly miffed, of course. If not for the fact that the natives had no idea they were really Jianghu cultivators, they would have taken offense and argued back already. "What? Why are you looking at me like that? How dare you? If it wasn't for the myriad beasts sect, you would have died on some forgotten streets a long time ago." The old man could not help but explode again when he saw their expressions. "Enough, great elder," the old woman that concerned Lu Yi chose this moment to speak up. "It's not like the girls wanted to risk the young master's life. We're not at the myriad beasts sect anymore, remember? If anyone is at fault here, it is us for taking too long to come to Bailandia." The old woman then looked at the girls and ordered, "You three, apologize to the great elder now." Instead of apologizing, the girls merely stared at Lu Ye's back. Feeling as if someone was burning a hole in his back, Lu Yi immediately straightened up and said, "It's okay, great elder. I'm the one who made the decision to go on the mission. It's not their fault." The great elder let out a long sigh. Young master, I know you love the girls, but you can't pamper them too much. Otherwise, forget it. We are all that is left of the sect now, and I do not wish to make the atmosphere any more unpleasant than it already is. Just remember to keep the young master out of danger next time. Finally, the girls let out a disgruntled "dim." Suddenly, the great elder looked at Amber. The white tiger was currently draped over Lu Ye's shoulder. The longer he stared, the brighter his eyes shone. Where did you find this little fella, young master? Is it okay if I take a look at it? Lu Yi tilted his head at Amber, and the white tiger immediately leaped over to the great elder. The old man's eyes brightened even more when he caught Amber. Oh, what an intelligent fella you are. After inspecting Amber thoroughly, the great elder finally returned the white tiger to Lu Yi with a wide smile on his face. Congratulations, young master. You are incredibly lucky to have recruited this incredible beast not long after you lost your chosen beast. If I'm not mistaken, this beast is a descendant of the 4 sacred beasts. It might not be very powerful right now, but it possesses incredible potential. If raised properly, its future is guaranteed to be brighter than most. Lu Yi was surprised. He did not think that the old man would be able to identify Amber's bloodline, but then again, what was he expecting? He was the great elder of the Myriad Beasts sect, the greatest beast-taming sect of this cultivation world before it was destroyed. Even Lu Yi himself wasn't sure that Amber was a descendant of the 4 sacred beasts until now. As for the chosen beast the great elder spoke of, Lu Yi knew nothing about the poor animal, of course. He wasn't actually the young master of the Myriad Beasts sect, he was just assuming his identity. According to Xia Qianqian, there used to be a Myriad Beasts domain in the past. Everything they were experiencing right now was something that had already happened in the distant past. They were reliving that experience now only because the heavens had somehow recreated it through some means he was nowhere powerful enough to even imagine. Both the Myriad Beasts sect and the young master of the Myriad Beasts sect were real, but Lu Yi had no idea what the young master's chosen beast was because the heavens hadn't given him that information. Heck, he didn't even know that the old man before him was the great elder until the old woman had spoken up. Lu Yi was an inquisitive man, so he asked, "How can I make it my chosen beast, great elder?" The great elder shot him a confused look. "I'm sorry." The art of converting a spirit beast into a chosen beast was the beating heart of beast taming itself. How could Lu Yi possibly not know about it? Lu Yi immediately feigned a sorrowful expression. "I'm sorry. I've been feeling pretty addled since the Myriad Beasts sect was destroyed. It's gotten to the point where I've forgotten many things that I should never forget." Xia Qianqian and the others rolled their eyes repeatedly when they heard this. However, the great elder accepted the shoddy excuse and sighed. "I see. I'm sorry you had such a hard time, young master." He then shoved his hand into his storage bag and searched around for a bit before passing Lu Yi a jade slip. "This contains the most important technique of our sect, the Beast Pact art. Keep it safe." Lu Yi accepted it respectfully and nodded. "Do not worry, great elder." Behind him, the girls felt their eyes widening like saucers. Who would have thought that asking was all Lu Yi needed to do to obtain the Myriad Beast sect's most important technique? They might not know what the Beast Pact art was, but it didn't take a genius to know that it must have something to do with beast taming. In Jianghu, beast taming was a minor cultivation faction at best, but here in the Myriad Beasts domain it was the complete opposite. They had no doubt that the cultivators of the Myriad Beasts domain were far better at the way of beast taming than the cultivators of Jianghu, not to mention that the Beast Pact art Lu Yi just received came from their strongest beast taming sect. The beast tamers of Jianghu would kill to obtain the Beast Pact art. It was extremely valuable to say the least. This old man isn't a nuisance. He's an opportunity. Xia Qianqian was a woman of action. She immediately asked, "Great elder, we've run out of cultivation resources. Can we?" The great elder immediately lost his pleasant expression and glared at her. "Did the sect master not give you a bag of spirit stones right before you left? Don't tell me you've used them all already." Xia Qianqian groaned on the inside. "Of course not. I haven't even met your heaven's damned sect master, much less received anything from him." The great elder turned back to Lu Yi with a pleasant expression. The guy must be a master of faces. Where is your spirit beast bag, young master? I'm sorry. The great elder let out another sorrowful sigh. Oh, young master. It's not easy to make spirit beast bags, you know. Our sect only has a dozen of them, and they were all passed down by our ancestors. You can't just lose it like this. He then removed a bag from his waist and handed it to Lu Yi. This is yours now. To say Lu Yi was flabbergasted would be an understatement, but his shock was not even close to the girls. They were so jealous they could strangle the lucky Sanuvabich. Forget Kitishin, even a veteran like Xia Qianqian had never seen anyone receiving such preferential treatment from a hidden realm native before. Xia Qianqian had thought that Lu Ye's identity was a superficial status at first, but clearly she was mistaken. The guy could abandon them all and go into hiding right now, and she wouldn't even be able to fault him for it. It's not fair. Why is a second-order cultivator getting so much profit for free, while I, a ninth-order cultivator, get nothing at all? Is it because he's a male? Not fair, heavens. Not fair. Xia Qianqian wanted to cry. It was at this moment the old woman spoke up. The young master has just returned from battle. Why don't we postpone this conversation to a later date? The great elder nodded. You're right. Please take your rest, young master. We will speak again after you've recovered. I shall be taking my rest then, Lu Yi replied. He was going to walk into the house when suddenly he felt a few pairs of red-hot gazes piercing his back. He hurriedly waved at the girls and added, You girls, follow me. Yes, sir. The girls hurriedly responded. As he was walking toward his room, he thought he heard the sound of grinding teeth behind his back. He wondered if it was his imagination. Lu Yi went into his room and closed the door. He had just sat down on the floor when the world suddenly grew a little dim. He looked up and saw the three women glaring down on him with thick, unbridled disdain. I can't help it. The heavens are the ones who arranged all this. Lu Yi tried to defend himself. Plus, I brought you all here to catch some rest, didn't I? We're splitting the loot. Xia Qianqian uttered through gritted teeth. She was going to explode if Lu Yi said no. Sure. How do you want to split it? You can have whatever's inside the spirit beast bag, but I want a copy of that beast packed art. Don't worry, I'm not going to sell it. I have a senior brother who's a beast tamer, and the art might be useful to him. Me too. Kitishin raised her hand immediately. Lan Zi was silent, but it was obvious she wanted a copy as well. Chapter 465, Beast-Packed Art? Verbal promises meant nothing, so everyone swore a heavenly oath to prove that they would definitely not sell the beast-packed art. They would only share it with their close ones or keep it for research. Seeing no problems with the oath, Lu Yi gave them the slip so they might copy it in their own time. He then picked up the spirit beast bag and examined it closely. Not only did the bag look like a conventional storage bag, it was sewn from a spirit beast skin as well. However, its aged appearance made it clear that it was something that had been passed down for many generations. The great elder had claimed that there were only a dozen or so spirit beast bags in the entire sect, and that they were inherited from their ancestors. Obviously, it was as rare as it was valuable. The great elder had removed the restriction lock on the bag before giving it to Lu Yi, so it took him little effort to refine it and make it his own. When he inspected it, he was surprised by what he found. The storage space of the spirit beast bag wasn't very big, and at first glance it looked like it was no different from a storage bag. Something about the storage space felt different from a storage bag's though. Lu Yi had an inkling what it was used for. Its very name was telling. Amber was currently napping beside Lu Yi. When it sensed Lu Ye's gaze, it looked up and tilted its head cutely. Lu Yi gestured at Amber with the spirit beast bag, so Amber rose to its feet and waited. It was only then that Lu Yi channeled his spiritual power and threw the spirit beast bag over the white tiger. As expected, Amber immediately vanished from view. When he checked, he found that the tamed beast had been stored inside the spirit beast bag. However, Amber was twisting and turning nonstop as if it wasn't used to the environment. To be fair, the storage space itself looked incredibly cramped now that it was inside. The bag itself wriggled as Amber struggled. I was right. The spirit beast bag really can be used to hold a living creature. A storage bag did not have such a function. In fact, none of the storage bags Lu Yi knew could be used to store a living creature. To do so would result in the eventual demise of said creature. Technically speaking, Lu Yi possessed an item that could be used to store not just one, but multiple living creatures. It was of course the Nine Realms Scroll. The spirit treasure could even be used to store multiple people, let alone other things. However, it wasn't just a combat item, but one that was shaped like a painting. It would be incredibly inconvenient to carry it on his person, not to mention that it cost a continuous stream of spiritual power to keep it activated. Convenience-wise, this spirit beast bag was 1,000,000 times better than the ward scroll. He could just hang it on his waist or carry it beneath his shirt. This way, Amber would not need to lie on its shoulder all the time. It wasn't that he had a problem with keeping Amber in the open. In fact, having Amber on his shoulder was usually a boost to his combat abilities unless he faced someone he needed to go all out against. The problem was that Amber was a very recognizable spirit beast. His enemies only needed to take one look at the white tiger to know that he was Lu Yi. Back in the Spirit Creek battlefield, there was practically no Thousand Demon Ridge cultivator who didn't know that Lu Yi of the Crimson Blood sect owned a white tiger. Even those who never met him could easily recognize him through Amber. As a result, Lu Yi was unable to conceal his identity most of the time. The Spirit Beast bag was a solution to this problem. In the future, he simply needed to store Amber in the Spirit Beast bag and put on a spirit artifact that could change his appearance to hide himself. He didn't have such an item yet, but he could just buy one from the Vault of Providence. No one would know who he was. Maybe it was because he was excited, but he didn't release Amber until some time later. Because of this, the white tiger immediately tried to take a bite out of the spirit beast bag when it was finally loose. Lu Yi hurriedly put a hand on its forehead to stop him. His plans would go up in flames if the spirit beast bag was damaged. It was at this moment Lu Yi received a message. He checked his battlefield imprint and discovered that it came from Yi. Yi chose this method of communication because she didn't want to reveal herself. A trump card should remain hidden until the right time after all. According to the girl, Amber didn't feel comfortable inside the spirit beast bag. Not only was it pitch black inside the bag, it was cramped to the point of being claustrophobic. That said, the storage space of the spirit beast bag wasn't fixed. Amber could fit inside even if it returned to its true form. Amber glowered as Lu Yi shoved the spirit beast bag under his shirt. He also promised Amber he would never put it in the bag unless absolutely necessary. It was only then it finally withdrew its gaze and calmed down. The three women had already finished copying the contents of the jade slip. They were currently meditating and recuperating their strength. Lu Yi tossed a couple of vital spirit pills into his mouth while checking the beast pact art. At first, he didn't care too much for it. He wasn't a beast tamer after all. However, his expression grew increasingly serious over time. The beast pact art had never existed in Jianghu. If the technique could be spread, it would improve the power of its beast tamers tremendously. The beast tamers were a minor cultivation faction in the cultivation world of Jianghu, but compared to other factions, there were a lot more beast tamers than, say, golem masters. Even Lu Yi technically counted as a beast tamer since Amber was his tamed beast. Intelligent and tameable spirit beasts were extremely useful, especially during the early stages of one's cultivation. They could fight alongside their tamers and be used as mounts. Plenty of cultivators carried at least one tamed beast with them when they were weak. Unfortunately, just like all other minor cultivation factions, beast tamers were considered a minor cultivation faction because they rarely produced champions. Beast tamers relied on their spirit beasts to be strong, and there were few things they loved more than raising powerful spirit beasts and commanding them in battle. As a result, most of their cultivation resources were spent on their spirit beasts rather than themselves. This meant that they were neglecting their own growth for their spirit beasts. Generally speaking, the beast tamers of Jianghu commanded between 10 to 30 spirit beasts. Lu Yi once fought a beast tamer in the Scroll of Supremacy battles. The beast tamer himself was a joke, but the 5 spirit beasts he commanded were quite powerful. Still, they weren't enough to stop Lu Yi. So he died as soon as Lu Yi broke through the defense line and reached him. In Lu Ye's opinion, cultivators should always focus on cultivating themselves. Spirit beasts were powerful supports at best. Before he read the Beast Pact art, Lu Yi thought that the beast tamers of the myriad beast domain were more or less the same as their Jianghu counterparts. It wasn't until he studied the technique that he realized that he was wrong. As it turned out, there was a reason beast taming became the primary cultivation faction in the myriad beast domain. In fact, every cultivation faction theoretically had a place in the world given the right circumstances. While the beast tamers of the myriad beasts domain also tamed, raised and fought alongside their spirit beasts, their focus was on the cultivator, not the spirit beasts. There wasn't a single beast tamer in the myriad beast domain that commanded over a dozen spirit beasts. In fact, most of them owned only one spirit beast, their chosen beast. Even the handful who owned more than one spirit beast would not keep more than 3 spirit beasts at a time. It was because they did not have the resources or the energy to raise that many spirit beasts. A chosen beast was a spirit beast whose life and energy were literally connected to the cultivator using a secret technique. They shared both honor and disgrace. If the cultivator lived, then the chosen beast lived. If the cultivator died, then the chosen beast died as well. The opposite wasn't true, however. The cultivator would suffer some backlash if they lost their chosen beast, but that was it. It was a secret technique that was created by cultivators after all. Of course, it was more advantageous toward the cultivator. A spirit beast that had just been born was usually chosen to be the chosen beast. It was because it was easier to mold its nature at a young age and forge a relationship with them. Only when the cultivator and the spirit beast were willing to give up their lives for one another would their life and energy become interconnected. After that, the spirit beast would become the cultivator's chosen beast, and a beast pact would be formed between them. After the beast pact was created, the cultivator could borrow their chosen beast's strength to strengthen themselves to a certain degree. If they had sufficient trust in one another, they could even subsume the chosen beast into the beast pact temporarily to drastically increase their strength. Be it the connection of life and energy or the formation of the beast pact, both of them proved that the way of beast taming in the myriad beasts domain focused on the growth of the cultivator, not the spirit beast. It was completely different from the beast tamers in Jianghu. If this secret technique could be carried to Jianghu, Lu Yi had good reason to believe that it would revolutionize the whole way of beast taming. No beast tamer in their right mind would reject this secret technique as it was powerful enough to push them into the big leagues. Never again would they be called a minor cultivation faction. Lu Yi was still studying the secret technique when suddenly, a floral scent brushed against his nostrils. He looked up and saw Xia Qianqian standing next to him and bumping him with an elbow. "Hey man, can we renegotiate the terms of our heavenly oath? If you don't mind, I would like to sell this secret technique to the Vault of Providence." It was clear she had noticed the importance of the secret technique as well. Without exaggeration, the Beast Pact art was a technique that could revolutionize and popularize the way of beast taming once and for all. She was sure they would be rewarded handsomely if they sold it to the Vault of Providence, but that wasn't the main objective. By giving up a secret technique that could revolutionize an entire way for altruistic purposes, they would earn the heavens' favor and attention. She could only imagine how much smoother her cultivation journey would be if the heavens themselves favored her. The girls had never encountered such a valuable opportunity until now. Since it was Lu Yi who brought them this opportunity, of course they had to speak to him about it, not to mention that they had just sworn a heavenly oath. Selling it now would be breaking the oath and earning the heavens' punishment. Also, they would not dare to sell it to the Vault of Providence if Lu Yi rejected the idea. "How many contribution points is it worth?" Lu Yi asked. Xia Qianqian chuckled. "Don't be shallow. This is no longer just a matter of contribution points. If we sell the Beast Pact art to the Vault of Providence, we will earn the favor of the heavens for sure. Do you know what that means? At the very least, your luck will be better than before." Now Lu Yi was tempted. As of late, his luck was extraordinary, probably because he had obtained the gift of providence. If what Xia Qianqian said was true, then selling the secret technique to the Vault of Providence would increase one's luck. He wondered which one had a greater effect, the gift of providence or the sale of the beast-packed art. The answer was probably the gift of providence. It was a boon none had received for decades after all. Are you sure about this? Lu Yi asked with a raised eyebrow. His luck was already extraordinary, sure, but who in their right mind would begrudge more luck? Do you know how the minor factions in Jianghu came to be? Xia Qianqian asked before answering her own question. They all came from hidden realms such as the myriad beasts domain. Our minor factions are all major factions in those cultivation worlds. The reason our cultivators came to learn them is precisely because someone shared their secret techniques with the world. Our existing beast-taming faction is no exception. A long time ago, our ancestors shared what they learned from a hidden realm with Jianghu and popularized them into all kinds of minor factions. Chapter 466, Life Energy Art. There are many secret techniques, cultivation techniques, and more that were also spread to Jianghu this way. The reason the cultivation world of Jianghu is overflowing with all kinds of schools of cultivation is because we have subsumed the essences of countless dead worlds and transformed them into what they are today. As a ninth-order cloud river realm cultivator, Xia Qianqian was more knowledgeable and experienced than Lu Yi in terms of the matter of Jianghu. Lu Yi could not help but pay close attention to her words. You should already know this, but an item that could revolutionize an entire faction like this beast-packed art is supremely important to our cultivation world. If we sell it to the Vault of Providence, we will earn the heavens' favor and improve our luck. This has been done many times in the past already. Once, there was a cultivator who carried a cultivation technique out of a hidden realm and sold it to the Vault of Providence. It eventually resulted in the creation of a whole new cultivation faction. Since then, the cultivator became incredibly lucky. Obviously, he wasn't so lucky that the world became his oyster, so to speak, but everything he set his mind to do had ended in success. In conclusion, let's sell the secret technique, Yi 6. You can have 70% of the contribution points. The rest of us will be content with just 10% each. As she said, the contribution points were secondary. The intangible benefit they would gain from the sale was the true profit of this sale. Still, they had only obtained this opportunity thanks to Lu Yi, so they had no qualms giving up 70% of the proceedings to him. By now, Kitty Shin and Lan Zi had stopped cultivating and were staring at him expectantly as well. There were countless cultivators who never earned the heavens' favor their whole lives, and now that opportunity was right in front of them. Of course, they weren't willing to give it up unless absolutely necessary. Lu Yi thought for a moment before nodding. But can we do that after we get out of this hidden realm? Xia Qianqian burst into a grin and slapped a hand on Lu Ye's shoulder. Thanks, buddy. From now on, you're one of my close friends. If you ever run into a crisis on the Cloud River battlefield, just send me a message, and I'll do everything in my power to help you. Clearly, the woman's friendship didn't come cheap. After that, the three women continued to recuperate while Lu Yi studied the secret technique that would connect his life and energy to Amber's. As the secret technique was the prerequisite to the beast-packed art, it was recorded in the jade slip as well. The technique itself wasn't too difficult to execute, but its requirement was a different story. Not only did the cultivator and the tamed beast have to trust each other unconditionally, they also had to be willing to give up their life for each other. Was Amber willing to give up its life for Lu Yi? The answer was yes, of course. They had journeyed side by side since both of them were just the dirt on the road, and they had braved many dangerous situations together. They had become an inseparable part of each other's life since a long time ago, not to mention that there was Yi as well. She was a precious family member to both of them. For other spirit beast and beast tamers, the trust requirement was something that would take a long time to nurture. However, Lu Yi and Amber had already met it a long time ago. The secret technique to connect their life and energy together wasn't complicated. In fact, Lu Yi saw it as a unique glyph he had never seen before. There existed countless glyphs in the world. Although Lu Yi had obtained many glyphs from the Tree of Glyphs and read even more from the books, he obviously hadn't seen all of them. From Lu Ye's perspective, the glyph was neither complex nor difficult to construct. But unlike a conventional glyph, It could only be constructed using the cultivator and the tamed beast's blood. Even before the Myriad Beasts sect was destroyed, there weren't many people in the sect who could execute this secret technique. It was because glyph weavers were a rare breed in the Myriad Beasts domain as well. Usually, they had to depend on the elders to execute the secret technique. Of course, this did not apply to Lu Yi. As a glyph weaver, he could execute the technique himself. First, Lu Yi placed a container on the floor. Then he sharpened the inviolable with sharp edge before cutting open his palm, allowing the blood to drip inside the container. The smell of blood immediately spread throughout the room. The three women shot him a look but ignored him soon after. After filling up around half of the container, Lu Yi pointed his saber at Amber and motioned for it to come closer. However, the white tiger actually backed away from him and shook his head like a fan. Amber looked mighty impressive when it unleashed its true self, and in battle it looked like nothing could faze it. In reality, it was terrified of pain. It was a weakness only Lu Yi and Yi were aware of. Lu Yi didn't care for Amber's rejection, of course. He caught the white tiger's paw and cut a thin line on its forelimb before it could struggle free. The poor beast immediately let out a pitiful whine as its pupils contracted into pin needles. Blood dripped profusely from the wound and into the container. Lu Yi let go only when the container was almost full. Amber immediately withdrew its paw and licked its wound aggressively. From time to time, it would shot Lu Yi an annoyed look. Lu Yi picked up the container and gave it a little shake so that their blood would mingle as one. Then, he left the room and asked the great elder for herbs. The old man was currently resting in the courtyard as well. The great elder figured out what Lu Yi was planning immediately. Are you planning to execute the life energy art, young master? The items Lu Yi was asking weren't especially precious in the Myriad Beasts domain because they didn't have many uses. They could only be used to refine spirit pills or execute the life energy art. Lu Yi nodded, and the great elder offered, "Do you need my assistance?" "It's okay. I can do it myself." The great elder advised, "I'm aware you wish to regain your strength as soon as possible. I'm also aware that your little fella is smarter than most spirit beasts. However, the technique will not succeed unless the two of you trust each other unconditionally. If you do not succeed, please do not take it to heart." In his opinion, Lu Ye's chosen beast had just perished not long ago. Although he managed to tame an intelligent spirit beast, it was extremely unlikely he would succeed in executing the life energy art. How long had it been since his young master procured the spirit beast? A few days? Hours even? There was no way their relationship had grown to the point where they were willing to sacrifice their lives for each other, not to mention that he didn't know that his young master knew the life energy art. However, he was just a servant, and Lu Yi the young master and final hope of the Myriad Beasts sect. The most he could do was to advise against this course of action in a roundabout manner. "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing," Lu Yi assured before walking back to the house. Lu Yi dropped the herbs he obtained from the great elder into the container and began blending them manually. The bright red blood looked even redder than before. When everything was ready, Lu Yi finally channeled his spiritual power into the blended blood and began constructing glyph, life energy in the air. The glyph was made up of several hundred yin and yang elements, but Lu Yi did not find it difficult to construct at all. After all, he was good enough to construct even glyph, void, a glyph that was made up of over 3,000 yin and yang elements. This was why he had succeeded at the first try. All the ingredients in the container were used up when the glyph was fully constructed. At first glance, the glyph resembled a Tai Chi diagram in the sense that it was also a circle that was made up of two matching counterparts. Lu Yi glanced at Amber, and the white tiger immediately moved closer to the glyph. Lu Yi sat down on the opposite side before activating the glyph. Red light immediately washed over the room. It was such an impressive sight that the three women opened their eyes to watch as well. The commotion even alarmed the great elder and the other Myriad Beasts sect cultivators outside the house. They stared worriedly in Lu Ye's direction, but they could not see through walls and check how the young man was doing, nor was it a good time to enter his room and check on him. Worst case scenario, they might interrupt the process and cause a backlash. They could only wait impatiently for the process to finish. When the glyph was activated, strands of red light immediately wrapped around Lu Yi and Amber like living ropes. Lu Yi groaned, and Amber growled at the same time because their blood had grown boiling hot all of a sudden. Right after that, red mist exited their pores and hung around their bodies. It was their vitality. Amber was in its cat form, but the life energy art forced it to manifest its true self. Luckily, Lu Yi had anticipated this and cleared up some space beforehand. It would have been quite the conundrum otherwise. As more and more vitality poured out of their bodies, everyone felt as if they were choking on blood. Thankfully, this phenomenon only lasted for a couple of seconds before the red mist converged at the space between Lu Yi and Amber. The ropes of red light wrapped around Lu Yi and Amber began spinning rapidly. Lu Yi felt as if he was losing and gaining vitality rapidly both at the same time. It was as if an indescribable power was drawing out his blood from one end of his body and injecting it into the other. It was a strange sensation to say the least. As time passed, Lu Yi felt a gradual change transforming his vitality. Not only was it stronger and richer, he felt as if some sort of bestial instinct was mixed in it. It came from none other than Amber. The dazzling scene would continue for another dozens of breaths before it finally subsided. As the red light faded, the glyph, life energy also turned blurry and unclear. When it vanished completely, the blood stench that permeated the room also dissipated like never existed. For a time, Lu Yi and Amber simply stared into each other's eyes. It was because both man and tiger felt as if their lives had been joined together. They also felt closer than ever before. Even before the life energy art, Lu Yi could already guess what Amber was thinking thanks to the bonding pact. Of course, it was nothing compared to Yi's bond with Amber. The ghost spirit literally knew what the white tiger was thinking at all times. After the life energy art, Lu Yi still could not hear Amber's thoughts and interact with it like it. However, he felt as if he understood the white tiger much better than before. Their bond had crossed the line of guessing and into actual comprehension. Amber clearly felt the same thing. It walked up to Lu Yi and rubbed its head against Lu Ye's face affectionately. That wasn't the end of their transformation. Lu Yi abruptly sensed something and pulled open his shirt. When he looked down, he saw the lifelike image of a tiger's head on his chest. It was as if someone had tattooed a glyph onto his chest using fresh blood. It looked mighty impressive. Lu Yi immediately recognized it as the Beast Pact. The Life Energy art and the Beast Pact art were separate techniques, and logically speaking the Beast Pact art could only be cast after the Life Energy art was executed successfully. But somehow, he had completed both the Life Energy art and the Beast Pact art at the same time. He wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth though. It was at this moment the Great Elder called out from outside, "Are you okay, young master?" It was clear that the old man had reached the end of his patience. He desperately wanted to know if Lu Yi was doing okay. Chapter 467, The Spirit Beast's Attacks? "I'm fine," Lu Yi replied before returning his focus back to his transformation. Lu Yi did not feel particularly changed despite having formed the Life Energy art and the Beast Pact art with Amber. He could understand Amber better, and their lives were now as one, but that was it. That said, Lu Yi had a feeling that he could borrow Amber's strength in battle if he wanted to. This ability alone was worth the trip to this hidden realm. A while later, Lu Yi exited the house and saw the Great Elder and the old woman waiting for him outside the door. The Great Elder's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Lu Yi and Amber. He asked, "Did you do it, young master?" It was clear that he had noticed something. While asking the question, the Great Elder wondered when his young master had picked up the Life Energy art. "Yeah," Lu Yi responded before pulling up his shirt. "I have a question, Great Elder. I was only casting the Life Energy art, so why did the Beast Pact take form as well?" Amazement bloomed across the Great Elder's face. "You," the old woman's eyes had widened in shock as well. "This is not a problem, right?" Although Lu Yi didn't feel anything wrong with the Beast Pact, he would rather be safe than sorry. The heavens haven't abandoned the Myriad Beasts sect after all. The Great Elder abruptly bellowed as tears streamed down his cheeks. It was such a surprising and unexpected reaction that Lu Yi was paralyzed with uncertainty for a time. Even the old woman was saying, the sect master would have been so glad if he could have seen this. It wasn't until they calmed down that Lu Yi finally learned why they had such an outburst. As it turned out, the life energy art and the beast pact art were really two parts of a whole. It was just that the Myriad Beasts sect had decided to separate the two secret techniques generations after it was created because it was easier to execute, less susceptible to potentially deadly errors, and allowed for more systematic progress. However, that didn't mean the effects of the revised secret technique were better than the original. The fact that Lu Yi had successfully formed the life energy art and the beast pact art with Amber at the same time meant that they were connected at a level that most beast tamers and their spirit beasts could not compare to. At this level, the tamed beast wasn't just a chosen beast anymore. It was a fated beast. The Myriad Beasts sect had a long history, but only a handful of disciples had ever owned a fated beast. Not only that, they were one of, if not the strongest champions of their era. It was thanks to their contribution that the Myriad Beasts sect ultimately became the greatest sect in the Myriad Beasts domain. The Myriad Beasts sect was destroyed, and Lu Ye's original chosen beast had perished in battle. This was without a doubt the darkest times of their sect. There was light at the end of the tunnel, however. Their young master had replaced his chosen beast with a fated beast. In the two seniors' opinion, this was the sign that not all hope was lost for the Myriad Beasts sect, and they might even rise to the top once more once they had survived this crisis. It was no wonder they were as excited as they were. Lu Yi did not really share their sentiment because he wasn't a true beast tamer. Amber was Amber. All he wanted to know was that the beast pact art would not bring harm to him or Amber. The white tiger could be a normal spirit beast, and he would still treat it like family. Besides, he wasn't the true young master of the Myriad Beast sect. He was just a passerby. If Xia Qianqian was right about this world, the true Myriad Beasts domain and Myriad Beasts sect were annihilated a long time ago. Everything he was experiencing right now was just something the heavens had recreated to put their cultivators to the test and hone them into greater cultivators. Suddenly, the ground shook unnaturally. Immediately after that, distorted waves of spiritual power washed over their bodies, and screams of battle broke out from every direction. The great elder immediately blanched. He looked like he couldn't comprehend what was going on. That was not the case for Lu Yi. He knew that the army of spirit beasts his group encountered a while ago had finally begun their assault. The army was the reason they escaped back to Bailandia in the first place. Now that he thought about it, it was about time they made contact with the city. Cultivators of the Myriad Beasts sect, answer me. A powerful voice abruptly resounded from the sky. A cultivator wearing bright armor and dressed as a general was addressing them from above. The general's arrogance immediately angered the great elder. The old man was just about to give him a piece of his mind when Lu Yi interjected, I am the young master of the Myriad Beasts sect. What business do you have, General? The general tossed a jade slip into Lu Ye's hands and answered in a hurried tone, the spirit beasts are attacking the city. Milord commands you to assist the Inferno Battalion in defending the Primus Third Wall immediately. What insolence! The great elder could not stop himself from yelling, tell Lu Wuzhai to come out and speak with me this instant. The general shot the great elder a cold look before replying, my lord also said that defending the walls is the responsibility of all cultivators residing within Bailandia. Anyone who refuses the responsibility will be executed without mercy. The great elder was going to say more when Lu Yi raised his hand and stopped him. He looked back at the general and said, please do not wait on our behalf, General. We shall take our leave immediately. The cultivator nodded slightly before flying away, probably to deliver the same order to the other cultivators. The great elder remained livid even after the general was gone. He cursed Lu Wuzhai for going too far. Lu Yi was far too precious to risk on the front lines. However, Lu Yi said, now is not the time to worry about my safety, great elder. Bailandia is the final bastion of humanity. If it falls, then the Myriad Beasts domain falls as well. We are the ones who came to this city to seek refuge. Now that the city is at stake, It is only right that we repay the favor and defend it, don't you agree? The great elder looked at Lu Yi as if he had grown two heads. It was because the young master he remembered was a pampered, unreasonable child. In fact, he was the perfect example of a hedonistic son who had far too much power and wealth for his own good. He usually spent day and night fooling around and not cultivating. The great elder's eyes reddened as he grabbed Lu Ye's hand and patted it repeatedly. "You've grown up, young master." The great elder thought to himself that hardships truly was the medicine that transformed a boy into a man. The rest of the Cloud River Realm cultivators were wearing gladdened expressions as well. Lu Yi could only smile wryly at their reactions. The door opened, and the girls came out to join them. They nodded when their eyes met with Lu Ye's. Lu Yi immersed his mind into the jade slip to find out where the Primus third wall was. As it turned out, it was closer than he thought. Lu Wuzhai had probably planned for them to guard this wall from the moment he assigned them to this house. The group followed behind Lu Yi as they flew toward the Primus third wall. Wherever they looked, the sky was filled with avian spirit beasts. There were so many that they almost blotted out the sun itself. Countless colorful lights were already exploding all over the place and turning the avian spirit beasts into showers of blood and gore. While Bylandia possessed a Grand Ward as a matter of course, it was only activated partially because a full activation would prevent the defenders behind the Grand Ward from attacking the spirit beasts as well. Considering that the enemy vastly outnumbered them, it was only a matter of time before the Grand Ward was destroyed. The only way they might survive this crisis was to kill as many spirit beasts as possible while defending. That was why numerous gaps had been opened at strategic locations throughout the Grand Ward. By funneling the spirit beasts into this gap, they could lessen the burden on the Grand Ward and improve their kill efficiency drastically. The cultivators of Bylandia weren't so dumb that they didn't understand basic strategy. The Primus third wall Lu Ye's group was assigned to was one of the places where a gap was opened. Right now, countless avian spirit beasts were flooding through the gap and attacking every human in sight. The powerless mortals could only hide in the buildings and pray that the cultivators could stop the assault. Inside the city, many cultivators could be seen flying here and there and hunting down the spirit beasts that managed to break through the defense line. Blood rained all over the city like a downpour. On the walls, the defenders were doing everything in their power to kill the spirit beasts that were climbing up the walls. They beat back the tide of flesh and madness again and again. It was utter chaos everywhere. When Lu Yi and his group arrived at the Primus third wall, they discovered that the section was already in danger of falling. Many spirit beasts had already climbed up to the walls and were tearing into the cultivators with wild abandon. Some people were hurt, some were dead, and some were roaring and fighting with all their might just to stay alive. Without reinforcements, this wall would have been overcome in just a matter of minutes. The defense line would be breached, and the endless horde would quickly overtake the entire city. The only way to stop this was to close the gap, but that also meant that the Grand Ward would withstand greater pressure. One could say that Lu Ye's group had arrived at the perfect time. Everyone in the group was a Cloud River Realm cultivator. Their numbers were few, but 3 of them were 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators. They were as powerful as they were indispensable in this battle. As usual, the cultivators kicked off their counterattack with spells and flying weapons first. The flying weapons made a tut-tut noise every time they pierced through a spirit beast's flesh. Lu Yi had fought many great battles on the Spirit Creek battlefield, but they were almost child's play compared to this battle. This was a battle with the fate of the entire world at stake. Humanity was already at their last legs, and their enemy, the spirit beasts, only needed to wipe out Bylandia to achieve total victory. If the cultivators lost this battle, they and everyone else behind them would be killed. Lu Yi was a cultivator from Jianghu. Personally, he did not think he would truly be able to empathize with the cultivators of the myriad beasts domain even if he was an active participant in it. However, he quickly discovered he was wrong. Not long after he set foot in this battle, he found himself fighting with everything he got. At that moment, it was as if he had truly become the young master of the myriad beasts sect, and that he was leading the remnants of his sect against the endless tide in hopes of postponing their extinction even a second longer. As Lu Yi was the leader of the group, he was supported by Xia Qianqian and the Great Elder. Wherever they went, even champion-class spirit beasts fell to their blades with insulting ease. Thanks to their efforts, every spirit beast that managed to climb onto the walls were slain in short order, and this section of the defense line was no longer in danger of collapsing. Vitality rolled off Lu Ye's body like clouds as blood dripped from the inviolable. Amber was overflowing with vitality as well. When he formed a beast pact with Amber at the beginning, Lu Yi thought that he didn't feel too different from before. Now that he was fighting though, he could clearly feel the additional energy coursing through his veins. After their vitality became linked, every attack Lu Yi executed was imbued with a bit of Amber's strength. Thanks to this, his attacks were stronger and swifter than before. Chapter 468 Holding On. Right after the Beast Pact was formed, Lu Yi already had the feeling that he could borrow strength from Amber. It just wasn't obvious at the time because they were resting. Now, it was clear that it wasn't just a feeling. He really could empower himself through the Beast Pact. He wasn't the only one who was doing this. The myriad beasts sect cultivators were borrowing strength from their chosen beasts. It was obvious from the way their vitality mingled together as one. This was the true power of a beast tamer. To Lu Yi, this benefit was more than welcomed. In the past, Amber rarely had the opportunity to intervene in his battles despite riding on top of his shoulder. It was because he was a lot more powerful than the White Tiger. The most Amber could do was to stun his enemies with its roar. It was different now. Amber could do nothing throughout the whole fight, and it would still be of help to Lu Yi by lending its strength. Not only that, this was just the beginning of the strength borrowing. When their vitality had mingled to a certain extent, Amber could even temporarily merge with Lu Yi to become a singular, more powerful entity. He did not expect that to happen anytime soon, of course. He had formed a beast pact with Amber less than an hour ago. He was nowhere close to figuring out how to merge with his chosen, fated beast. Lu Yi swung the flame-wreathed inviolable through a spirit beast's neck and killed it instantly. A blood-drenched cultivator crawled out from beneath the dead creature, straightened his helmet, and gave Lu Yi a nod. "Thank you for the save, fellow cultivator." "Who are you people?" The cultivator Lu Yi saved was obviously a native. He would have died if Lu Yi hadn't acted fast enough. "We are the Myriad Beasts sect." His eyes lit up when he heard this. The Myriad Beasts sect. No wonder you managed to plug the leak so easily. He then raised his arm and shouted, "Brothers and sisters, our friends from the Myriad Beasts sect have come to join us. Have courage and keep fighting the enemy. These beasts must not be allowed to break through our defense line." RH. Countless cultivators responded just as loudly. The man wiped away the blood on his face before asking, "This section of the wall is guarded by my Inferno battalion, and I am the battalion commander, Fang Zhuan. What is your name, fellow cultivator?" "Yi 6. Well met, brother Yi 6. Now, we are kinda in a tight spot here, so I shan't waste any more time exchanging pleasantries with you. Since you are here, I assume that you've received the mobilization order from our lord. I need you and your men to go to that location," Fang Zhuan pointed, "and protect Howling Thunder and my brothers and sisters. Can you do that?" Lu Yi looked at the direction he was pointing. He saw a big ward and something that looked like the skull of a spirit beast at the center of the ward. He could tell it wasn't a real skull because it gave off a metallic glint. Whatever the skull was made of, it was probably the Howling Thunder Fang Zhuan was referring to. Right now, 7 or 8 Inferno Battalion cultivators surrounded the Howling Thunder and were channeling their spiritual power into the ward. Judging from their auras, there were both Cloud River Realm cultivators and Spirit Creek Realm cultivators. The ward grew increasingly threatening to his senses as more and more spiritual power was injected into it. As it turned out, Howling Thunder was an offensive ward with a spirit artifact as the core. Lu Yi also figured out why it was called Howling Thunder at first glance. He was a ward cultivator. It would be embarrassing if he couldn't figure out something so obvious. Howling Thunder was most likely a top-grade spell artifact or even a spirit treasure. Naturally, it would be difficult for any cultivator to activate it alone, especially since the strongest cultivator in the Myriad Beasts domain was just a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. Unfortunately, it was also unrealistic to expect multiple cultivators to wield the weapon. It was like having multiple people wielding a single sword. Forget how awkward that would be, the distribution of spiritual power alone would be a difficult problem to solve. It was a different story if they used wards though. By setting up a ward around Howling Thunder, they could ensure proper power distribution and wield it properly. Howling Thunder was really a siege weapon, and most cultivators never saw it outside of large-scale battles. The good news was that it functioned as an excellent anti-siege weapon as well. As Lu Yi watched, a ball of light began forming in front of the weapon. As more and more spiritual power was poured into the ward, even a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator like Xia Qianqian felt her skin pricking with instinctual fear, and her hair standing on end. What this meant was that Howling Thunder was powerful enough to threaten even a champion like Xia Qianqian. It should not need to be said that Lu Yi felt deeply threatened as well. If the weapon was aimed in his direction, he would be flying away with Soar and Windwalk functioning at max capacity already. There was a sudden boom that sounded like the howl of thunder. The entire wall shook, and the ball of light gathering in front of Howling Thunder transformed into a beam of light that stabbed over a kilometer deep into the throng of spirit beasts like the sword of the heavens themselves, lightning crackling the whole time. It did not matter if the spirit beast was champion level or not. The beam of light turned them into ashes all the same. 10 whole breaths later, the beam of light finally faded into nothing. It wasn't until much later that the spirit beasts filled up the massive hole it left behind. For a time, Lu Yi was completely speechless. This was the first time he'd seen the weapon in action, but he could already tell that it wasn't something any Cloud River Realm cultivator could endure. The one strike had taken out hundreds of spirit beasts, and it only took 7 or 8 cultivators to perform the feat. The Howling Thunder he was seeing wasn't unique in the sense that similarly powerful anti-siege weapons had been installed in every section of the wall. Of course, their firepower varied greatly as well. Regardless, they were all powerful weapons capable of dishing out an insane amount of damage. After Howling Thunder had fired its payload, its cultivators immediately sat on the floor and focused on recovering their strength as much as possible. The attack was powerful, but it also took a lot of energy out of them. That was why Fang Zhuan had requested Lu Yi and the Myriad Beasts sect cultivators to protect them. Both the weapon and the cultivators needed to be protected at all times. "I got it. We promise that we will keep them safe." Lu Yi replied with a nod. "I trust you." Fang Zhuan saluted Lu Yi respectfully before raising his spirit artifact and throwing himself back into battle. The Myriad Beasts sect cultivators were already fighting alongside the Inferno Battalion cultivators and assisting in the defense effort. As for Lu Yi, he summoned the 3 women to his side before leaving to protect the Howling Thunder and its cultivators. Lu Yi was going all out. All 9 of his flying weapons were up and killing while he ran all over the place to cut down any spirit beast who dared to climb onto the walls. From time to time, he would unleash a Fire Phoenix technique and blast the avian spirit beasts to Kingdom Come as well. Of the 4 of them, Xia Qianqian was the one who killed the most spirit beasts, not just because her cultivation level was the highest, but also because she was a spell cultivator. Every time she cast a powerful spell, an entire swathe of spirit beasts would be turned into ashes. She even had the time to produce her identity pass and check how many battle points she had earned. One look at the grin on her face was all Lu Yi needed to see to know that the answer was a lot. For the cultivators of the Myriad Beasts domain, this was the battle that determined whether they could continue existing in this cultivation world. But for the cultivators of Jianghu, this was just a golden opportunity to earn as many battle points as possible. After all, the more battle points they gained, the more amulets they could exchange for at the quartermaster department. Lu Yi himself could attest to how addicting it felt to boost his cultivation level using an amulet. Lu Ye's killing efficiency and speed were much slower than Xia Qianqian's, but that was only natural considering that their cultivation level was 7 minor realms apart. But what Lu Yi lacked in power he made up for with a vast set of skills. He could kill enemies remotely with his flying weapons, cast powerful spells that destroyed large groups of enemies, and even fight powerful spirit beasts at close range all at the same time. Lan Zi wasn't doing poorly either. She only had one flying weapon, but it was insanely powerful. Combined with her long swords and her fighting style, she was killing multiple spirit beasts almost every second or so. Kitty Shun was currently doubting her whole life right now. She was already desensitized to Lu Ye's abnormal strength, as he was the man who dared to invade an arcane glade alone and practically dominate multiple cultivators who were several minor realms above his level. It was impossible to judge him by normal standards. She had no doubt that he was an extremely accomplished ranker on the Scroll of Supremacy before he entered the Cloud River battlefield, as he was on par with the average 4th or 5th order Cloud River realm cultivator despite just being a 2nd order. But what about Lan Zi? How was she, a 2nd order cultivator, performing as well as she, a 5th order cultivator? She wasn't that weak, was she? Kitty Shun could not help but feel a bit depressed. She was a top 50 Spirit Creek realm ranker as well, but she could not even hold a candle to these two. And so the cultivators of the Myriad Beasts sect and Inferno Battalion worked together to defend the entire section of the wall. It wasn't long before everyone was positively soaked in blood. The carcasses beneath the walls had piled up as high as hills by this point. It felt like they were breathing blood, not air. Despite the one-sided massacre, the spirit beasts kept coming as if they didn't know death. They continued to climb up the walls or fly over it. These crazed spirit beasts only had one goal, and that was to kill every human in the entire world. This was a cultivation world where beast tamers were its strongest cultivators. Naturally, the spirit beasts vastly outnumbered the humans even before the sickness had spread. That was why the crazed spirit beasts not only succeeded in defeating the humans, but also conquering most of the lands until Bylandia was their only remaining bastion. The section Jia 3 wall wasn't doing so hot. It was the same for the other walls. That said, Bylandia was the city where the remaining humans of the entire cultivation world were gathered. Faced with the threat of extinction, even the most uncooperative sects were able to set down their differences and work together to fight against the spirit beasts. Therefore, Bylandia wasn't going to fall in the short term no matter what. Chapter 469, Cruel War? The Myriad Beasts domain was a dead world that the heavens had refined into a hidden realm for the purpose of honing the cultivators of Jianghu via inexplicable means. This meant Bylandia had fallen to the spirit beasts in the original history. In this reenactment though, things were slightly different thanks to the participation of the cultivators of Jianghu. At least hundreds of Cloud River realm cultivators had entered this hidden realm after all. Not all of them were high-level cultivators, but they were still a powerful force that could not be underestimated. Right now, the cultivators of Jianghu were guarding the walls and working together with the natives to resist the spirit beasts. On the section Jia 3 wall, a thunderous boom rocked the world once more. A dazzling beam of light plowed into the area with the greatest number of spirit beasts and evaporated everything within its path. When it faded, it left behind a smoking trail that was a kilometer long at least. It was howling thunder making short work of the spirit beasts, of course. The Myriad Beasts sect and Inferno Battalion cultivators were doing their best to thin the horde as well. Flying weapons and spells dropped countless spirit beasts before they could get close enough to attack. By now, the carcasses beneath the walls had grown tall enough for most spirit beasts to use them to climb up to the walls. They kept coming no matter how many of them were killed. Lu Yi had swung his saber so many times that his weapon arm had turned completely numb. Lan Zi and Kitty Shun were pale-faced, panting heavily. The battle was so intense that even Cloud River realm cultivators could not hold out for long. Worse, the spirit beasts were invading just as fiercely as before when even a 9th order cultivator like Xia Chanshan was slowly but surely slowing down. It was as if their numbers would never end. The defenders were almost at their limit already. If nothing changed, then this section of the defense line was going to collapse in less than an hour. Thankfully, Bylandia had already prepared for this scenario. Some time passed, and the defenders suddenly heard a rumble from inside the city. Then, Fang Zhuan's voice reached everyone. "Hang on, everyone. The ward cultivators are closing the gaps on the wards now." Lu Yi shot a glance at the gap in front of the section Jia3 wall. It was slowly but surely growing narrower and narrower. Someone was clearly controlling the Grand Ward. As the gap shrank, the area the cultivators needed to defend grew smaller as well. It made it so much easier to defend against the enemies. In the end, the gaps were completely shut, and the spirit beasts were fully blocked out by the Grand Ward. It was just a temporary reprieve, but for now, the battle was finally over. The defenders on the section Jia3 wall relaxed and collapsed to their feet in relief. There was no time to rest, however. They hurriedly shoved a handful of spirit pills into their mouths and focused on recovering their strength. At the same time, a new gap opened in front of the walls right next to the section Jia3 wall. The fresh defenders of that wall fought against a new tide of spirit beasts. Against such numbers, Bylandia was well aware that it was better to lead the enemy down planned kill lanes than to block them out completely. They could activate the Grand Ward in full, but such folly would only shorten its lifespan and hasten Bylandia's demise drastically. This was the solution they had come up with to handle the endless tide. By opening gaps on the walls periodically and systematically, they ensured that their defense would be more effective. For example, the defenders next to the section Jia3 wall were resting while they were battling against the horde. Now, it was their turn to fight while the defenders of the section Jia3 wall rested. Alternating defenses this way not only allowed for greater margins of error, but also ensured that the cultivators would last as long as possible both physically and mentally. Whoever came up with this arrangement clearly had a knack for seeing the bigger picture. Right now, nearly everyone on the section Jia3 wall was meditating and recovering their strength. Lu Yi was the only one who was sitting in front of Howling Thunder and examining the wards around it curiously. It was clear that whoever created the wards surrounding Howling Thunder was a much better ward cultivator than him. Although he was capable of setting up the same wards, the finer details in certain areas would have been much rougher. Besides that, he was extremely interested in the offensive ward. He had never seen one that used a spirit treasure as the core, and Howling Thunder had more than proven its worth during the battle. The weapon was easily one of the main reasons the section Jia3 wall was able to hold out until their shift was over. He was still studying the ward when Xia Qianqian sat down beside him. "What are you doing? You should focus on recovering your strength." "I'm just indulging in a bit of curiosity." What he didn't say was that he didn't need to focus to recover his strength. He could be sleeping right now, and his body would still automatically digest the spirit pills he consumed and pull in the surrounding world's spiritual qi. "Conserve your strength. You will need it later," Xia Qianqian advised. "What do you mean?" "I don't know if you've noticed, but this city was doomed from the start. It's only a matter before it's overwhelmed. Have you thought about what to do after the city is breached?" "What do you advise, fellow cultivator Xia?" Xia Qianqian shook her head. "Do I look like an intellectual to you? I'm just telling you to prepare for the inevitable escape after the city is breached." Lu Yi frowned. "But this entire cultivation world is already dominated by the spirit beasts. Where can we go even if we make a run for it? That is why we need to escape before the city is breached." Xia Qianqian sighed. "I've experienced plenty of hidden realms in the past, but I gotta say that this one feels especially impossible." And it was. Humanity itself was at the brink of extinction. There was only so much an individual could do considering the circumstances. "What are the other hidden realms like?" Lu Yi asked curiously. Unlike Xia Qianqian, he was just a second order. It would be a long time before he graduated from the Cloud River battlefield. Any advice he could pry from Xia Qianqian would surely aid him in his survival. No two hidden realms are the exact same. For example, none of the hidden realms I've experienced so far has pitted me against a heavens-damned extinction-level threat until now. You mentioned that the objective of a hidden realm like this is to train the cultivators to solve the root of the problem, resolve the crisis it's facing, and save the world, didn't you? Sure, but we don't even know what made the spirit beasts go insane in the first place. And trust me, I've already tried to investigate this. How can we solve the problem if we don't even know what it is? It was a good point. Why had the spirit beasts gone insane? The disease had spread like wildfire too. In just a year, countless spirit beasts across the entire cultivation world abruptly went insane and began attacking the humans. Logically speaking, the disease that drove most spirit beasts insane had to come from somewhere. The only way to stop this was to find the source and destroy it. But where was the source? What was the source, for that matter? The cultivators of the myriad beasts domain never found out the truth before they were wiped out. They were eventually subsumed by the heavens and transformed into a hidden realm. It wasn't like they were completely clueless, of course. For one, they knew that the disease was incredibly infectious, but strangely it didn't look like the disease was spread via contact. He knew this because the myriad beast sex cultivators had been fighting alongside their spirit beasts and none of them showed any signs of derangement so far. Amber was perfectly fine as well. There's no point in thinking too deeply into it. Considering the circumstances, the best we can do is to see what happens and improvise on the fly. Anyway, we really should stop talking and focus on recovering our strength, Xia Qianxian replied before taking her own advice. Lu Yi tossed 2 vital spirit pills into his mouth and chewed slowly. Over 2 hours later, Fang Zhuan let out a hoarse yell. It's time, people. Get ready for battle. The Inferno Battalion and Myriad Beasts sect cultivators hadn't fully recovered yet, but they immediately got to their feet and rushed into position. The cultivators responsible for charging the Howling Thunder also assumed their positions and channeled their spiritual power into the ward immediately. It hummed in response to the energy. The gap in front of the neighboring wall began to close slowly at the same time that one was opened right in front of the section Jianghu wall. A swarm of spirit beasts immediately rushed through the gap, and the battle was engaged once more. The alternating defense gave the defenders the opportunity to catch their breaths every 2 to 4 hours or so, but their stamina and spiritual power still declined over time. 2 to 4 hours wasn't enough time for the cultivators to recover back to full strength. Worse, the flood of spirit beasts truly seemed to be unending. They had begun besieging the city since noon, and they did not stop even when the next dawn came. The section Jianghu wall defenders and their neighbor had alternated shifts at least 6 times throughout the period. However, the intensity of the siege did not lessen in the slightest. The battle lasted so long that even the ward supporting Howling Thunder had worn out enough to suffer a temporary breakdown, forcing Lu Yi to perform some emergency repairs to get it running again. Thank goodness he had observed the ward beforehand, or he wouldn't even know how to begin to repair it. It took an entire hour before he finally repaired the ward and enabled the weapon to let out its thunderous roar once more. The gap in the Grand Ward closed a moment later. It was finally their neighbor's turn to hold back the tide. Lu Yi collapsed to the ground immediately after the burden was lifted off his shoulders. It had been too close. During the hour he was repairing the offensive ward, the spirit beasts had nearly broken through their defense line multiple times. It was only thanks to the defenders' selfless sacrifice that they were able to hold out until the end. Suddenly, Lu Yi realized that he hadn't heard anything from Fang Zhuan. Every time it was their turn to rest, the battalion commander had never failed to bark out the command until now. Lu Yi looked left and right until his gaze fixed on a spirit beast's carcass about 30 meters away from him, laying on a cultivator. It looked like it had crushed the top of his head between its jaws before someone had managed to kill it. The unfortunate man was none other than Fang Zhuan. The Inferno battalion commander wasn't the only one who had died during the defense. The Inferno battalion had lost over half of its numbers since the battle began. The Myriad Beasts sect cultivators had been reduced to just 6 as well. No one in Lu Ye's group of 4 had died, but they were all injured to a certain extent. Kitty Shun especially was lying on the ground and staring at the sky blankly. Her face was deathly pale, and her shirt around the abdomen area was drenched in fresh blood. The woman had encountered plenty of dangers throughout her journey. She was a 5th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator after all, but this was easily the worst battle of her life. This defensive war far surpassed any crisis she had ever encountered. Suddenly, Amber started twisting its body restlessly and letting out a strange growl. Lu Yi was just about to ask what was wrong when a hint of red flashed through its pupils, and it hurriedly jumped off Lu Ye's shoulder. Mutant energy rolled off its body as it manifested its true self. When it looked up, Lu Yi saw that its eyes had turned scarlet. Chapter 470, The Truth of the Rabies. Young master, watch out. The great elder was resting nearby when Amber began to act strangely. He immediately leaped to his feet and attempted to attack Amber. From his perspective, Lu Ye's fated beast had caught the rabies. The only way to deal with this situation was to kill the spirit beast before it harmed its master and everyone else around it. However, a flash of fiery red stopped the great elder in his tracks. He glanced at Lu Yi in astonishment while blurting, "Young master? Just give me a moment." Lu Yi ordered with a grim expression. Amber was the last spirit beast he expected to catch the rabies. The white tiger had been fighting by his side this whole time, and he was certain that it wasn't injured once throughout the battle. With that in mind, how on earth did he catch the rabies? There was one thing that was markedly different between Amber and other maddened spirit beasts, however. Although the white tiger was staring at him with scarlet eyes and growling uncontrollably, it was equally clear that it was doing its best to maintain its sanity. Otherwise, it would have attacked him and everyone else around it already. Amber was Lu Ye's tamed beast for more than 2 years, and it was restricted by the bonding pact bestowed by the heavens themselves. Despite having caught the rabies, it didn't lose its mind completely like the others. It was at this moment Lu Yi received a message via his battlefield imprint. As expected, it came from Yi. Lu Yi looked up at Amber immediately after he finished reading the message. At the same time, Amber bowed its head before Lu Yi. There was a metallic glint, and before everyone knew it, Lu Yi had stabbed his saber 3 inches into the back of Amber's neck. The attack was so sudden that no one was able to react in time. Xia Qianqian and the girls were all staring at him in astonishment. Just a moment ago, the young man had stopped the great elder from killing Amber. Was it because he didn't want Amber to die in a stranger's hands? Or? They realized they were wrong the second the thought crossed their minds. If Lu Yi truly wanted to kill his tamed beast, there were a number of vital spots he could have chosen that would make the death as painless as possible. Suddenly, everyone heard a strange cry from Amber. It almost sounded like a cicada's cry. However, the battlefield was noisy enough that they weren't sure if they had actually heard right. It was at this moment that Lu Yi pulled his saber out of Amber's neck. Everyone's gaze suddenly became affixed to the tip of the blade. There was what looked like a tiny cicada at the end of the saber. It was struggling and writhing furiously. Before they could see it clearly though, it suddenly exploded into a pool of black liquid. Lu Yi hurriedly enveloped the black liquid with his spiritual power before it could hit anyone. Then, he kept it afloat as everyone stared at the black liquid with varying expressions on their faces. At the same time, Amber relaxed the second the strange cicada was removed from the back of its neck. It shook its head once and looked up. The unnatural scarlet coloring its eyes earlier was no longer present. The back of its neck was still leaking blood, but this level of injury was at worst superficial to a powerful spirit beast like Amber. While staring warily at the black liquid being trapped within Lu Ye's energy globe, it walked behind Lu Yi and stayed there. Lu Yi turned around and met Xia Qianqian's eyes for a moment. Then, he said, "I found the reason the spirit beast went insane." "What?" Xia Qianqian did not react immediately because she was still stunned by everything she had seen until now. Then realization hit her like a hammer. "You mean that thing you just removed earlier is? It's not rabies or even a disease. It's a parasite. A parasite is controlling all the spirit beasts." Xia Qianqian's eyes widened in shock. "Are you sure?" 100%. If he was alone, he would not have been able to discover the truth so quickly. It was because the parasite that had buried itself into Amber's neck had blended it perfectly with Amber's aura. The camouflage was so perfect that he could have searched every inch of Amber's body with his spiritual power and still not discover the insect in the end. In fact, this was precisely why the cultivators of the myriad beasts domain never discovered the truth behind the spirit beast's madness. The parasite was so well hidden they couldn't find it even after capturing some crazed spirit beasts and investigating their bodies thoroughly. Amber had to look after it, however. The girl had not shown herself ever since she entered this hidden realm. At the beginning, she didn't notice anything wrong with Amber's body either. Then it started acting strangely, and she hurriedly investigated its body for signs of abnormality. She immediately found the strange parasite and messaged Lu Yi about it. The parasite was so undetectable that Lu Yi still did not know when exactly Amber had caught the parasite. However, he was certain the parasite must be incredibly tiny when it infected Amber at the beginning, so tiny that it could elude even a cultivator's senses. It swiftly grew in size once it had burrowed itself completely into Amber's body. It was impossible to guess what its maximum size was, but it was the size of a cicada when Lu Yi had extracted it from Amber's neck. Unfortunately, the parasite had exploded almost as soon as it was brought to light. Perhaps it was designed that way to avoid being discovered by the cultivators. Everyone around Lu Yi stared at the black liquid trapped inside Lu Ye's energy globe closely. To their shock, it was swimming with many minuscule insects just as Lu Yi had theorized. No wonder it was able to remain hidden until now. After the others were done studying the black liquid, Lu Yi channeled his fire attribute spiritual power and burned every last drop of it. Growl. Amber transformed into its cat form and returned to Lu Ye's shoulder. Then, it started growling as if it was making conversation with Lu Yi. It wasn't. To be specific, it was translating everything Amber was saying and conveying it to Lu Yi via the battlefield imprint. The girl was Amber's ghost spirit, so she understood its thoughts perfectly. This was one area even Lu Yi, the White Tiger's owner, could not hope to do better even with the bonding pact of the heavens, the life energy art and the beast pact art tying them closer than ever before. At best, Lu Yi could make some simple conversation with Amber. He could not discern its exact thoughts like Yi could. Lu Yi pretended to nod his head to Amber's growls as he read Yi's messages. Xia Qianqian asked curiously, "What is it saying?" She had never seen such an intelligent spirit beast until now. Unfortunately, Yi wasn't done conveying Amber's message yet, so he just pretended he hadn't heard her and kept nodding his head. A while later, he finally said while pointing, it said it felt something from that direction when it was being controlled by the parasite. What does that mean exactly? It's not sure, but it could feel an invisible connection between the parasite and whatever's in that direction. Is it the source of the madness? Xia Qianqian's eyes lit up immediately. The reason the spirit beasts went insane wasn't because there was something wrong with them, but because their body had been taken control by parasites. Now, Amber was saying that it felt an invisible connection between the parasite and something that lay somewhere down that direction. It was impossible not to think that this something might just be the root of all evil. Assuming they were right, then the path ahead of them was finally clear. All they needed to do was to head there and eliminate the root of all evil. Great Elder, do you know what the spirit beast might be referring to? Xia Qianqian spun toward the old man. Let me think. Down that direction is... The Great Elder muttered thoughtfully before his eyes suddenly lit up with realization. Lu Yi noticed the reaction and asked, "Tell me, Great Elder." "It's where the Black Tortoise sect used to reside, and..." A frown overcame the Great Elder's features. "It is also where the madness first appeared before sweeping across the entire myriad beasts' domain." His answer was the final nail in the coffin. Lu Yi and Xia Qianqian had no doubt that whatever Amber had sensed most likely resided in the Black Tortoise sect. But the Black Tortoise sect was wiped out a long time ago, and we never found anything when we went to investigate it. You investigated the crazed spirit beasts and never found the parasite either. Is it that surprising that you might have missed something during your search? Xia Qianqian retorted and earned a shameful look from the Great Elder. In his opinion, they would not have discovered the existence of the parasites if his young master wasn't close enough with his fated beast that he could understand its words. Technically speaking, they couldn't be sure that the Black Tortoise sect was the root of all evil. However, it was the best answer they could come up with the information they currently had. Lu Yi and Xia Qianqian exchanged a knowing look with each other. There was no saving Bylandia if they chose to remain where they were. At this rate, the city could give it their 200%, and they would still be overwhelmed in the matter of days. The fall of the city would mean that the myriad beasts' domain had failed to deviate from its current path of extinction. Horrible, horrible things were going to befall the natives and even the cultivators Jianghu if they allowed that to happen. In fact, now that he thought about it, traveling to the source of the problem and solving it once and for all was the only path to survival. It would be extremely dangerous, but it was the only chance they might survive this. We're going to have to gather a team, Lu Yi said solemnly. I'll contact them right away, Xia Qianqian replied before she began messaging her acquaintances. Xia Qianqian was a 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator, so her social contacts were way bigger than Lu Ye's as a matter of course. There had to be someone in this hidden realm that was on her list of contacts. Young master, are you planning to? The Great Elder began. Lu Yi thought for a second before telling the truth. Great Elder, we're going to the Black Tortoise sect. It might hold the answer to all our problems. You want to head there now? The Great Elder blanched immediately. The spirit beasts were currently sieging the city. To leave now was to push against the endless tide. It was dangerous to say the least. It will be too late if we don't leave as soon as possible. Death is the only thing that awaits us if we stay here. The Great Elder instinctively wanted to advise against such a dangerous course of action, but when he really thought about it, he realized that Lu Yi was speaking the truth. So, he nodded and declared, "You're right, young master. To stay here is to die a slow and painful death. In that case, I will speak with Lu Wuzhai and see if he can spare some men to aid us on our quest." Lu Yi nodded approvingly. That's a good idea. Obviously, the bigger the team, the higher their chances of success would be. Please give me a moment, young master, the Great Elder said before flying straight toward the Lord's residence. A while later, a cultivator flew over from a distance and landed in front of them. He said in a lazy voice, "Are you aware you're going to lose battle points if you leave your post at a critical time like this, Xia Qianqian?" Chapter 471, My name is Pang Dehai. What's the matter, Xia Qianqian? The fat man asked while withdrawing his gaze. His acting was so good that no one realized he recognized Lu Yi except Lu Yi himself. I'll tell you about it when everyone's here. The fat man frowned but did not push the matter further. While waiting, he checked his identity pass before grimacing visibly. They deducted 500 battle points from my score. As he said, leaving one's post at a critical time like this cost battle points, and 500 battle points was not a small number. It was enough to purchase 2 white amulets. Another cultivator flew over to the group before withdrawing their sword aura. He was a tall man and a sword cultivator. The fat man greeted him warmly, "Brother Zhou Hai." Zhou Hai nodded in acknowledgement and descended on the wall. Then, he tossed a spirit pill into his mouth and meditated in silence. More and more people joined them as time passed. It wasn't long before a couple more cultivators joined their group. Obviously, they had all been called to this location by Xia Qianqian. What was concerning was that the fat man seemed to be familiar with all of them. He could always address the newcomers by their name and make small conversation with them. Xia Qianqian had messaged more people than this, but no one else joined them after that. The fat man said, "Well, it looks like everyone who could attend our little meeting has already arrived. Let's jump straight into business, shall we?" The group turned to look at Xia Qianqian, and the 9th Order cultivator said calmly, "We found the reason the spirit beasts went insane." Her words immediately caused everyone to perk up. Since they entered the hidden realm and figured out what was plaguing the myriad beasts' domain, they had made multiple attempts to find out the cause of the madness. Unfortunately, their efforts had ended in total failure. Just like the natives, they were unable to find anything wrong with the crazed spirit beasts even after capturing them and investigating them from head to toe. Naturally, they were extremely interested to hear what Xia Qianqian had to say. The cultivators of Jianghu were aware that the only way they might survive this hidden realm was to solve the root of the problem. And to solve the root of the problem, they must first figure out what it was. If a greenhorn like Lu Yi could see that there was no way they could defend Bylandia until the end, then the others had to have realized their predicament as well. It was suicide to defend Doggedly City without considering other avenues of action. They were all Cloud River Realm cultivators. No one wanted to die here when they had a bright future ahead of them. Tell us, Xia Qianqian. It's a parasite, a kind of insectoid to be exact. Xia Qianqian replied before relaying everything they had discovered earlier. The sword cultivator named Zhou Hai listened quietly to the end before flying away on his sword. A while later, he returned with a struggling spirit beast with gorgeous, fiery red fur. It was probably a blood fox. 3 inches behind the neck, right? Zhou Hai asked Xia Qianqian for confirmation. She nodded affirmatively. That was where we found our parasite, yes. There was a flash of metal and a mournful cry from the blood fox Zhou Hai was holding. Everyone gazed at his sword and found what looked like a struggling cicada at the tip. The parasite exploded into black liquid just a second later, but since Zhou Hai was forewarned about its ability, he was able to move fast enough to annihilate every drop before it could get anywhere. There really is a parasite. Now they knew for certain that what Xia Qianqian said was true. Someone asked, unbelievable. If these spirit beasts were all controlled by a parasite, then why didn't we find anything when we were studying their carcasses? They must have exploded the moment the spirit beast was killed. That is why we didn't find anything. The fat man added with a grimace, insectoids. Why is it always insectoids? It was clear from everyone's expressions that they shared his sentiment. I've never encountered an insectoid that burrowed into a spirit beast and took control of their body, however. Does that mean there's an insectoid nest somewhere in this world? Most likely. But where could it be? The situation won't change if we do not know where it is. Since fellow cultivator Xia summoned all of us over, I bet she already has a clue where it's located. Am I right, fellow cultivator Xia? When the group looked at Xia Qianqian, she answered, You're right, but I must clarify that I'm not the one who discovered the clue. It is my friend, fellow cultivator Yi 6 who found it. He has an extremely intelligent tamed beast that was nearly taken over by a parasite, but was able to hold it off long enough to convey its location and allow Yi 6 to remove it. That is why the credit goes wholly to them. Also, when the tamed beast was controlled by the parasite, it felt a strange connection from over there. Everyone followed her finger when she pointed. Assuming that we're not mistaken, it should be where the insectoid nest is located. The fat man gazed at Lu Yi with interest. Your name is Yi 6, is it? What a coincidence. I have a friend who's called that name as well. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Pang Dehai. Fellow cultivator Pang. What else can you tell us about the insectoid nest? I don't know much about the insectoid nest or if there is even an insectoid nest in that location, but I can tell you that my tamed beast definitely sensed something in that direction. Moreover, we got clarification that that is where the headquarters of the Black Tortoise sect used Tobe, the very place where the first outbreak occurred before spreading throughout the whole cultivation world. Everyone's eyes brightened when they heard this. Zhou Hai declared, that has to be it. The insectoid nest must be located at the Black Tortoise sect. There's no time to waste. Let us depart right away. The sooner we take out the insectoid nest, the sooner we can end this crisis. Not yet. We're still waiting for someone. Xia Qianqian hurriedly stopped them. It was at this moment a cultivator descended in front of them. It was none other than the great elder who offered to speak with the city lord. His ugly expression told Lu Yi that he hadn't brought good news, however. As expected, the great elder swore loudly, that muddle-headed idiot who calls himself a city lord. I cannot believe he would do this when we're literally days away from total annihilation. Just how foolish can he be? He saluted Lu Yi apologetically after the rest. My apologies for failing you, young master. What did the city lord say, great elder? The old man answered in a furious tone. Not only did that old dog ignore my advice, he forbade us from leaving Bylandia. He declared that we'll be branded as deserters and never be allowed to set foot in Bylandia again if we dare to leave. The surviving members of the Myriad Beasts sect were filled with disdain and righteous anger when they heard this. Lu Yi consoled them by saying, It's okay. We already have enough people to carry out the mission. It was only now that the great elder realized that their group had been joined by 8 newcomers. He asked, Who are these people, young master? Lu Yi kept his answer brief. They are fellow cultivators who have decided to join us on our mission after hearing the truth, great elder. Pleasant surprise bloomed across the old man's features. Wonderful! Most wonderful! At the same time, he thought to himself once more that his young master had truly grown up, and that he was no longer the hedonistic son who knew nothing about life's suffering anymore. Unbeknownst to Lu Yi, Pang Dehai and the other Jiuzhou cultivators were staring at him with shocked expressions. Pang Dehai moved closer to Xia Qianqian and asked in a low tone, "Hey, this old man's a native, right? Why is he addressing Yi Six as young master? Who is Yi Six in this world?" "He's the young master of the Myriad Beasts sect." "The Myriad Beasts sect?" Pang Dehai blanked out for a second before blurting in astonishment, "That is some insane luck. I've entered this type of hidden realm many times in the past, but I never heard of anyone who was given such a prestigious identity." Xia Qianqian replied in a jealous voice, "I know, right? I never encountered someone like him either. His fate must be through the roof if the heavens would value him so. Now that I think about it, he's the one who discovered the insectoids in the first place, isn't he? Damn. By the way, what is your identity?" "That's none of your business," Xia Qianqian retorted. She was a ninth-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. There was no way she could ever admit that she was Lu Ye's attendant. Pang Dehai chuckled. Xia Qianqian might have refrained from answering, but that didn't stop him from figuring out the truth anyway. The young woman realized this and kicked him hard in the stomach. It was only then she said, "Since we're all here, let's move." No one had anything to say against that. The gap in front of the Section Jia3 wall was still closed, so they could only leave through the gap in front of their neighbor's wall. They immediately summoned their flying spirit artifact and flew off in the blink of an eye. For a time, the surviving members of the Inferno Battalion could only stare at their backs in shock. Then, they reported the desertion to the city lord's residence. Although only 8 people had answered Xia Qianqian's summons, they were quite powerful in their own right. Pang Dehai and Zhou Hai were both ninth-order cultivators, which meant that their group had 5 ninth-order cultivators in total. Everyone else was 5th order or higher as well. Lu Yi and Lan Zi were the only 2 second-order cultivators in the group, but they were far stronger than the average second-order cultivator because they were the former champion and first runner-up of the Scroll of Supremacy, respectively. They would not be holding the groups back. Their small group began fighting their way out of Bailandia. 2 body-tempering cultivators opened the way while everyone else blasted at the spirit beasts with their flying weapons or spells. Wherever they went, powerful attacks swept the spirit beasts like thunder, and colorful lights exploded across the sky like fireworks. Lu Yi did not face too much pressure because he was positioned at the center of the group, and he was flanked by the Great Elder and the surviving members of the Myriad Beasts sect. Even so, the endless tide of spirit beasts slowly, but surely, wore him down. There were just too many of them. He could believe it if someone told him that every spirit beast in the entire Myriad Beasts domain had come to Bailandia. There were enough avian spirit beasts in the sky to blot out the sun, not to mention the sea of spirit beasts on the ground. Their group was powerful enough to handle most threats, but it still took them an entire hour to finally break through the encirclement. They had inevitably lost some members in the process as well. 2 of them were Myriad Beasts sect cultivators, and 1 a Jiuzhou cultivator. Lu Yi remembered that the Jiuzhou cultivator was a short ghost cultivator. No one knew if they were still alive. They had been separated on the way out. Even after they had broken through the encirclement, they were still being pursued by a massive number of spirit beasts. Unfortunately, where the avian spirit beasts lacked in everything else, they made up in speed. Shaking them off wasn't going to be easy. Chapter 472, The Black Tortoise Sect. The group thinned the horde of avian spirit beasts chasing after them as they escaped. It wasn't until a quarter of a day later that they finally eliminated all of their pursuers. For a time, they simply floated in the air and watched their surroundings for more hostiles. The Myriad Beasts domain was vast, but there wasn't a corner of the world that hadn't been ravaged by the spirit beasts. The entire world reeked of death and carnage. At the front, Xia Qianqian, Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai engaged each other in a quick discussion before Xia Qianqian ordered, "Let's rest for an hour." The group descended on the mountain range right underneath them and quickly found a resting place. Lu Yi tossed 2 spirit pills into his mouth before holding a middle-grade spirit stone in each hand. He didn't need to absorb the spiritual power in the spirit stones to recover his strength, but the pretense was necessary to keep the others from recognizing his abnormality. It was at this moment a fat man sat beside him. It was none other than Pang Dehai. It had been over 2 years since he met the man at Evil Moon Valley, but he was even fatter than he remembered. Lu Yi did not understand how it was possible for a Cloud River Realm cultivator to fail to control his body shape. Lu Yi could not help but recall Lishan when he saw Pang Dehai. He was the one who spread his nickname, Lu Yi. "Your tamed beast is quite handsome, fellow cultivator Yi?" Pang Dehai said smilingly. "You can tame one yourself after we're done here, fellow cultivator Pang. The one thing the myriad beasts domain doesn't lack is spirit beasts. I have tried raising tamed beasts in the past, but for some reason, they always end up in my stomach." The man said the scariest thing in a nonchalant tone while rubbing his belly. He then lowered his voice and added, "I noticed that the myriad beasts sect cultivators are uniquely skilled in the way of beast taming. They seem to be capable of merging their vitality with their spirit beasts to improve their own combat prowess. You should ask them about it if you're interested in the technique. They probably won't reject you considering your identity." The man had clearly seen some things during the earlier battle, things that clashed with what he knew about beast tamers. At the very least, he was sure that no beast tamer in Jianghu could have performed some of the feats the myriad beasts sect cultivators had displayed. "I've already obtained them," Lu Yi replied in a low tone as well. Pang Dehai raised an eyebrow before giving him a thumbs up. Lu Yi wasn't content to end the conversation here, however. He asked, "By the way, there is something I want to ask you about, fellow cultivator Pang." "Speak." "I noticed that you brought up the insectoid nest the moment we told you about the parasites. Why is that?" He didn't understand why everyone else seemed certain that there was an insectoid nest somewhere in the myriad beast domain. He would have asked it sooner, but the timing wasn't right until now. "Did you experience an insectoid attack during your time at the Spirit Creek battlefield?" Pang Dehai asked. Lu Yi nodded in acknowledgement. "Good. That'll save me some breath. Since you've experienced an insectoid attack, you should know that the insectoids do not grow out of thin air. They are all born from an insectoid nest. Going by that logic, the parasites that control the spirit beasts must be born from an insectoid nest as well." Pang Dehai explained patiently, "You're still new to the Cloud River battlefield, but you'll come to understand that the insectoids are usually the big bad behind many hidden realms. Generally speaking, the best way to deal with insectoids is to take out their nest. Otherwise, you can kill 1 billion insectoids, and you'll still be nowhere close to eliminating them. Also, insectoids exist not just in the hidden realms of the Cloud River battlefield, but also Jianghu itself." By now, Pang Dehai had Lu Ye's full attention. "The reason none of us thought that the big bad behind this hidden realm before Xia Qianqian told us is because we've never encountered this type of insectoid before. Or perhaps we have encountered them in the past, but they're so well hidden that we never knew they existed until now. We're really glad you discovered the truth, you know that? If not for you, we'd still be stuck defending against an impossible tide of spirit beasts. They would have died if that was the case." Pang Dehai put a hand on Lu Ye's shoulder and said seriously, "If you run into a similar situation in the future, always remember to take the insectoids into consideration. And if you do find an insectoid, remember that locating the insectoid nest is the key to solving the root of the problem once and for all." Lu Yi nodded in acknowledgement. "How far are we from the Black Tortoise sect, Great Elder?" Lu Yi turned to the Great Elder and asked. The old man answered, "Looking at our current pace, I reckon it will take another 4 to 6 hours to get there. All things considered, that's close enough." Lu Yi silently compared the directions he got from Amber earlier to their current destination. It was a good match. He was growing more and more certain that the Black Tortoise sect was the right destination. The group resumed their journey after an hour had passed. Everyone looked much better after catching an hour's rest. They did not encounter any resistance or even a single spirit beast on their way to the Black Tortoise sect. It was as if every spirit beast in the myriad beasts domain was concentrated at Bilandia. Over 4 hours later, after they flew over a meandering mountain range and several spirit peaks, the great elder finally pointed his finger and declared, "That's where the Black Tortoise sect is." They followed his finger and saw what looked like a massive black tortoise sitting on top of the landscape and looking down on them from above. There were many rundown buildings on the back of the tortoise. It was clear that the Black Tortoise sect used to be a powerful sect. Unfortunately, the insectoids had completely destroyed them. The Black Tortoise sect's headquarters wasn't completely devoid of life as they expected, however. To everyone's surprise, they saw a massive amount of spirit beasts concentrated within the ruined sect. It was a welcoming sight because it meant that their guess was most likely correct. Right now, practically every spirit beast in the myriad beast domain was besieging Bilandia right now. It was why they hadn't encountered even the shadow of a spirit beast on the way. With that in mind, it made no sense that an army of spirit beasts would be gathered at the Black Tortoise sect, a place that was destroyed at least a year ago. This meant that the insectoid nest was most likely here, and these spirit beasts were stationed here to guard it. "There's a lot of them," Pang Dehai said solemnly while looking left and right. Although this army of spirit beasts was nowhere as big as the one besieging Bilandia right now, it still wasn't something their group of slightly over a dozen could handle. Therefore, the question became, how could they locate the insectoid nest without alarming these spirit beasts? Insectoid nests were usually located underground. It made conventional search methods practically useless. The good news was that every insectoid nest had at least one entrance leading to the surface. All they needed to do was locate one of these entrances. Still, there was a massive plot of land they had to cover. It was going to take a while to say the least. "How many ghost cultivators do we have?" Pang Dehai turned back to the group and asked. Xia Qianqian looked around with an awkward expression. "We had 2, but one of the ghost cultivators got separated from the group while they were breaking out of the encirclement. The Myriad Beasts sect obviously did not have a ghost cultivator or even stealth capabilities since they were all beast tamers. Xia Qianqian and Pang Dehai were spell cultivators, and everyone else besides the 2 body-tempering cultivators in their group were combat cultivators. Everyone looked at their one ghost cultivator. She was a petite woman with strange patterns etched on her neck. She knew they were asking too much from her, but she still forced herself to say, "I'll give it a try." She descended on the ground and vanished soon after. It was at this moment Lu Yi offered, "I'll look around too." Xia Qianqian spun on him in surprise. "You're a ghost cultivator too? Just who are you?" At first glance, it looked like Lu Yi was a beast tamer since he was carrying a tamed beast. However, his fighting style was that of a combat cultivator, and he also knew how to cast some spells at the level of a true spell cultivator. Now, he was implying he could scout like a ghost cultivator as well. It was insane to say the least. No. I have some concealment talisman paper with me," Lu Yi lied. The concealment effect of a concealment talisman paper was nowhere near as good as a ghost cultivator's concealment skill, but that was fine, because he wasn't planning on using one anyway. He was going to use glyph, invisibility, to hide himself. Its effects still couldn't compare to a ghost cultivator's skill, but it wasn't far behind. "Alright, be careful," Pang Dehai advised. Lu Yi nodded and landed in the opposite direction of the female ghost cultivator. A while later, Lu Yi landed in the middle of a forest and looked up. He was unable to see Pang Dehai and the others because they were hovering real high in the sky to avoid being detected by the spirit beasts. He then turned himself invisible using glyph, invisibility, before whispering. He emerged from Amber's body and said, "Leave it to me." She then dashed straight into the underground. The Black Tortoise sect's territory was huge. Without sufficient manpower, they could spend an entire month here and still not locate the entrance. That was why Lu Yi had not expected their singular ghost cultivator to find the entrance in time. He was a different story. As an apparition, She possessed the special ability to pass through solid objects like they did not exist, and she should not encounter any difficulties as long as she didn't stray too far away from Amber. This was a characteristic not even the greatest ghost cultivator in the world possessed. With her help, they should be able to locate the underground insectoid nest within a reasonable time frame. As for Lu Yi, he wasn't, actually, going to do anything. He just had to wait patiently for Yi to give him the signal. In the best-case scenario, Yi could even destroy the insectoid nest herself and resolve the crisis once and for all. She was strong enough to do that now. Time passed bit by bit. An hour later, Lu Yi finally received a message from Yi saying that she had found the insectoid nest. As it turned out, it was located 300 meters beneath the ground. No wonder the myriad beasts domain cultivators had failed to find anything when they searched this place. It was far beyond the range of a Cloud River Realm cultivator's perception. Yi was currently checking if she could destroy the insectoid nest by herself. Unfortunately, she quickly sent another message saying that there were too many spirit beasts guarding the insectoid nest. She alone would not be able to destroy the entire nest in an instant. Lu Yi had ventured into an insectoid nest once during his time at the Spirit Creek battlefield. Therefore, he was fairly familiar with its internal structure. He immediately told her to stay her hand and just focus on finding a tunnel that would lead to a surface entrance. This was way faster than trying to locate an entrance on the surface. Another hour passed, and Yi messaged saying that she had found an entrance. It was located in a mountain well behind the Black Tortoise sect. He waited until Yi had returned to him before meeting up with Xia Qianqian and the others. Everyone turned around to face him with expectant expressions. When he nodded, said, "I found it." They all let out an audible sigh of relief. After he told them where the insectoid nest was located, Xia Qianqian frowned deeply. "How are we going to deal with the army of spirit beasts blocking the way? It'll take too long to thin them little by little, but if we don't, they're definitely going to catch us in a pincer attack." Chapter 473. Something's not right? The entrance is a well, right? We can collapse the entrance after we've gone inside, someone suggested. That's too dangerous. Worst case scenario, we would be burying ourselves, another cultivator disagreed. Should we try luring the spirit beasts away? That could work, but I doubt it'll be easy since the reason they're here is to guard the insectoid nest. At best, we can only lure away some of them. It's better than nothing. Who will do it? For a time, no one said a thing. It wasn't that the task was dangerous. The spirit beasts were numerous, but not even the millions and millions besieging Bylandia were able to stop them from breaking out. But those responsible for luring the spirit beasts away would not be participating in the operation to destroy the insectoid nest. To the Jianghu cultivators, this was a golden opportunity to earn a ton of battle points. If they succeeded in destroying the insectoid nest and consequently saving the myriad beast domain, they would surely be rewarded handsomely. A while later, every Jianghu cultivator in the group turned to look at Lu Yi. Their meaning was as plain as day. Without waiting for someone to speak up, Lu Yi looked at the Great Elder and said, "Great Elder, I leave it to you and our people to lure away the spirit beasts." He agreed. "Sure. I'll be accompanying you though, young master." The Myriad Beasts sect only had 6 people left, and losing the Great Elder would reduce that number to 5. While a task like this could benefit from having greater numbers, losing one person didn't matter too much in the grand scheme of things. Moreover, the Great Elder was a 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator. At the very least, he could protect Lu Yi to a certain extent. Lu Yi agreed immediately. "No problem." The old woman said, "Take care, young master," before descending toward the ground. It wasn't long before they started blasting away at the spirit beasts and doing their best to lure the spirit beasts to them. As expected, the group of 5 was quickly chased by a horde of spirit beasts. For maximum effect, they circled around the headquarters a few times before finally making their escape. The number of spirit beasts guarding the Black Tortoise sect was immediately reduced by half. This wasn't ideal or even a good outcome per se, but it was the outcome they had expected. Theoretically, they could dispatch a couple more people to lure away the spirit beasts, But that would be folly because there were plenty of spirit beasts in the insectoid nest as well. If they did that, there was a high chance the remaining group would not be strong enough to destroy the insectoid nest. Please lead the way, fellow cultivator Yi, Zhou said. Without a word, Lu Yi descended and flew straight toward the well. Their auras quickly caught the attention of the remaining spirit beasts. Large groups of avian spirit beasts began swarming them from all sides. Behind Lu Yi, the Great Elder and the Jiuzhou cultivators launched their spells and flying weapons in response. They were able to blast a hole through the horde and make it all the way to the well. Lu Yi was the first to enter the well, followed by the Great Elder, Kitty Shen, Lan Zi, Xia Qianqian, and finally everyone else. The body-tempering cultivators were the last to enter. After everyone was inside the wall, the two body-tempering cultivators covering their rear immediately attacked the steening around them. It wasn't long before rocks began falling from above. The well was less than 30 meters deep. The second Lu Yi landed on the floor, Amber immediately jumped off his shoulder and ran into a hidden passage. Lu Yi hurriedly followed behind it. He had scouted the underground passage beforehand. With her guidance, there was no chance that Amber would get lost. Meanwhile, the body-tempering cultivators had finally collapsed the steening and sealed off the entrance. For now, they would not need to worry about pursuers. The commotion had alerted the spirit beasts lurking in the underground, however. They could hear their roars mingling with those who were stuck on the surface for now. The winding passage they were using was not the only passage in the underground as a matter of course. There seemed to be an infinite amount of forks as well. Without Yi's guidance, it would have taken them hours, if not days, to make it to the insectoid nest. By then, it would already be too late. From time to time, spirit beasts would emerge from a side passage and attempt to kill them all. Their scarlet eyes were especially conspicuous in the darkness. Although Lu Yi was leading the way, he wasn't worried for his safety because the Great Elder was protecting him. With his cultivation level, no one could get within 10 meters of Lu Yi without being annihilated in one punch. He could not deny it felt great to be protected by a 9th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator who was absolutely loyal to him. The group did not encounter any difficulties along the way because the Great Elder wasn't the only 9th-order cultivator in the group. Xia Qianqian, Pang Dehai and Zhou Hai were all 9th-order cultivators, and Zhou Hai in particular was a sword cultivator. Not only could he slay most spirit beasts in one strike, he was so fast that even Lu Yi could not see his movements. The gap between their cultivation levels was just too large, not to mention that sword cultivators were famed for their killing power. When they were over 300 meters below the surface, the path in front of them suddenly widened into a massive chamber. They had finally arrived at the insectoid nest. The insectoid nest looked identical to the one Lu Yi had seen at the Spirit Creek battlefield. It looked like they were inside a karst cave, though the interior was completely covered by a layer of flesh. Not only were the walls covered in bulging flesh sacks, these wriggled from time to time as if there was something inside them. They would not be surprised if something actually burst out of the sacks and attacked them. It felt disgusting to walk on the flesh. The air was filled with an acrid stench that reminded them of a living stomach. It was at this moment countless pairs of scarlet pupils appeared from behind the darkness. There were so many of them that one could mistake them for a cavern of fireflies. It should not need to be said, but the insectoid nest was guarded by a massive number of spirit beasts. There was a brief standoff before one spirit beast let out a mighty roar. Then, every spirit beast in the area charged at Lu Ye's group. Spells and flying weapons illuminated the cave. Zhou Hai's swords were especially bright. Although this was the first time they fought alongside one another, their teamwork still far exceeded that of a group of Spirit Creek Realm cultivators. The two body-tempering cultivators immediately occupied the front lines and summoned their shield spirit artifacts. While cycling their vitality and spiritual power, they did everything in their power to hold back the tide of spirit beasts. The combat cultivators positioned themselves at the center of the formation, and the spell cultivators went at the rear. The start of the battle was the hardest to endure. The spirit beasts were still at their full strength as they battered the two body-tempering cultivators from multiple directions, causing their shields to flash wildly. Over time, the cave became filled with blood stench, and the horde grew smaller and smaller. Eventually, they reached a point where the spirit beasts could no longer threaten their formation in the slightest. Some members of the group were injured during the battle, but no one was ever in danger of dying. The end was so close they could almost taste it. They worked even harder to kill the spirit beasts. An hour later, they finally took out every spirit beast in the insectoid nest. Carcasses piled like little hills all over the place. Suddenly, Xia Qianqian said, "Something isn't right about this." "I agree." Pang Dehai panted while tossing a vital spirit pill into his mouth. Zhou Hai was silent, but the fact that his aura remained strong proved that he was on full alert. Even the Great Elder was sticking to Lu Ye's side with a tight expression on his face. All the Ninth Order cultivators sensed that something was amiss. This was supposed to be the battle that decided it all, but they had barely encountered any difficulties at all. Sure, there were some harrowing moments here and there, but it was still nothing compared to their breakout from Bilandia. Something fishy was going on here. It was at this moment Lu Yi declared, "Our exit is blocked." The group hurriedly turned around and found exactly that. The all-pervading flesh wall had blocked the exit completely before they knew it. No one knew when it happened. After all, they were all busy killing the enemies in front of them. This meant that the insectoid nest was completely sealed. Zhou Hai tried attacking the flesh wall with his sword, but he only managed to cut through the surface layer. When the light faded, they saw the wall of flesh wriggling and restoring itself to pristine condition in the blink of an eye. Everyone's faces were severe and grim-looking. At this point, it was clear that this insectoid nest wasn't quite the same as the one they were familiar with. Forget the myriad beast domain, even they had never encountered this type of insectoid nest before. The flesh wall wasn't just tough enough to block a Ninth Order sword cultivator's slash. It recovered so fast that any attempt to destroy it would just be a waste of time. What should they do? "I have another question." Pang Dehai walked up to a flesh sack and stepped on it. The insectoids in this world are shaped like tiny cicadas, right? If that's true, then what the hell are inside these flesh sacks? Usually, this type of flesh sac was used to breed large insectoids. However, the insectoids of this world obviously didn't need them. Moreover, these flesh sacs had been wriggling from the moment they laid eyes on them. It looked like whatever was inside the flesh sacs could burst out at any moment. Zhou Hai gripped his sword and walked toward the center of the nest. "It doesn't matter what they are. The problem will be solved once we destroy the core of the nest." Every insectoid nest had a core called the nucleus of life. It was a massive flesh sac where all of the nest's energy was gathered. If the nucleus of life was destroyed, then the nest would lose the ability to breed more insectoids. This insectoid nest obviously had a nucleus of life as well. They just couldn't get close until now because of the spirit beasts. Zhou Hai walked up to the massive flesh sac at the center of the nest. His sword shone like the sun when he wiped a pair of fingers across the blade. He then channeled all of his spiritual power and swung his sword straight down on the core. He didn't manage to cut the core in half, not because it was too resilient, but because a claw abruptly burst out of the flesh sac and caught his blade in mid-swing. The fact that the claw had managed to stop his full-powered slash proved just how tough it was. Zhou Hai's pupils contracted into needles. The rest of the group were stunned by this turn of events as well. No one thought that the nucleus of life would be hiding a living being. Chapter 474, Niu Meng. A pair of scarlet beams erupted from within the flesh sac. It took them a second to realize that they were a pair of human eyes. Just like the crazed spirit beasts, they were unnaturally bright, crimson, and utterly devoid of emotions. Only madness and violence dwelled in those pupils. Every hair on Zhou Hai's body was standing on end, and it wasn't just because of the alarm bells blaring in full force inside his head. He immediately withdrew his sword and leaped away from the strange human without a second thought. Unfortunately, he was just a little too late. What looked like a hoof abruptly burst out of the flesh sac and struck Zhou Hai dead center in the abdomen. The kick was so swift and powerful that it shattered his protective aura in an instant and sent him flying across the air. He crashed hard in the middle of the group and rolled a few times before his momentum was finally spent. Everyone was stunned by this turn of events, to say the least. There was a loud shredding noise as the flesh sack was ripped apart. The strange human inside it then grabbed the broken flesh walls with large, talon-like hands and pulled himself upright. His entire body was covered in some sort of sticky liquid. It was clear he was no ordinary human being. Not only was he unnaturally tall and muscular, he had a pair of bull horns on his head, talon-like hands, hoof-like feet, and even a small tail attached to his back. At first glance, the strange man looked like a mutant cultivator. However, the group quickly amended their impression when they observed him a little longer. It was at this moment the great elder suddenly blurted, "Niu Meng?" "Niu who?" Lu Yi asked with a frown. "He is Niu Meng, the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect," the great elder explained. The situation immediately took a turn for the eerie. The group had come to destroy the insectoid nest, and one might say that they were halfway to success by reaching the nest itself. What happened after that was nothing like what they expected, however. For starters, no one knew why the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect would emerge from an insectoid nest's nucleus of life. Second, they did not understand why he looked like a mutant cultivator. Third, the insectoid nest should be shriveling rapidly since its nucleus of life was destroyed, but in reality it did not look like it was affected in the slightest. Finally, Niu Meng was overflowing with vitality. He already looked like a formidable enemy in the first place, but his vitality was something no Cloud River Realm cultivator should possess. "Careful. He's very powerful," Zhou Hai warned while clutching his stomach and spitting out a mouthful of blood. The surprise attack had been way too close from comfort. It could have killed him outright if he hadn't sensed it coming beforehand. "He's being controlled by a parasite," Xia Qianqian said solemnly. Of all the unnatural things that had occurred since they entered the insectoid nest, this was the one that scared them the most. When a spirit beast caught the rabies, their eyes would turn scarlet red moments before they turned violent and insane. Later, they found out that it was really the parasites that were manipulating the spirit beasts into madness. However, there had never been a case where a cultivator had succumbed to the madness. It was why everyone thought that the parasites could only infect spirit beasts, until now. Niu Meng was obviously being controlled by the parasites. Naturally, they could not help but wonder if someone in their group was being controlled as well. It was impossible to know if someone was being controlled until the parasites had completely taken over their body. The spirit beasts were the prime example of that. The parasite inside their body was capable of mimicking their host's aura so well that no one even realized that this was really an insectoid invasion until Lu Yi accidentally discovered the truth. With that in mind, who could say that they weren't infected already? While everyone looked fine for the time being, it could be because the parasites hadn't yet grown strong enough to take over them. It was at this moment Lu Yi declared loudly, "Calm down, people. I promise you we aren't infected by parasites." The reason he was so confident was because he had the Tree of Glyphs. The miraculous entity could burn even the pill poison in one's body. If a parasite had tried to take over his body, the Tree of Glyphs would have caught it and burned it to a crisp already. However, he never sensed something like this since he entered the myriad beast's domain. "How do you know?" someone asked, but Lu Yi did not give them an answer. The truth wasn't something he could tell anyone. The group was still whispering among themselves when suddenly, they heard shredding noises from all around them. What they saw next chilled them to the core. Every flesh sac in the insectoid nest had decided to pop open at the same time, revealing a scarlet-eyed, liquid-covered cultivator inside. Some of them looked like mutant cultivators just like Niu Meng, and some looked completely human. Suddenly, the group found themselves outnumbered almost 4-1. It was a horrifying realization to say the least. Before this, they thought that getting to the insectoid nest would be the most difficult part of this mission. It was only now that they realized that the greatest threat was waiting for them inside the insectoid nest. "They're all Black Tortoise sect cultivators," the Great Elder said solemnly. He was the only native in the group and the Great Elder of the Myriad Beasts sect. Naturally, he was quite familiar with the disciples of the Black Tortoise sect. The situation was dire, but it wasn't without a silver lining. While the insectoids had proven capable of infecting and controlling a cultivator, everything they saw up till this point proved that it wasn't something they could do willy-nilly like the spirit beasts. Otherwise, the myriad beasts' domain would have fallen way sooner. Just like the crazed spirit beasts, the Black Tortoise sect cultivators were overflowing with violence and madness as well. Escape wasn't an option as the insectoid nest was completely sealed right now. The only way they might live was to slay every infected cultivator in the chamber. The group would dearly like to hold a discussion before engaging the Black Tortoise sect cultivators in battle, but of course the enemy wasn't going to give them the time to do so. The battle kicked off almost as soon as the cultivators had burst out of the flesh sacks. Vitality and spiritual power surged as the Jianghu cultivators and one myriad beasts sect cultivator tightened their formation. They pressed their backs against a flesh wall and braced themselves against the incoming assault. As usual, the body-tempering cultivators stood at the forefront and blocked as many attacks as possible. Their shield spirit artifacts flashed violently as flesh, metal and spells rained down from every direction. To the group's astonishment and relief, the Black Tortoise sect cultivators fought like mindless beasts despite drastically outnumbering them. They were controlled by the parasites, but the trade-off was their intelligence and rationality. They knew how to channel spiritual power into their limbs to strengthen their attacks, but that was it. They even bit at them like animals. The Jianghu cultivators calmed down a little. The Black Tortoise sect cultivators didn't just outnumber them, their average cultivation level was higher as well. If these people could fight at their full strength, then this would have been an absolute massacre. Violent impacts and colorful explosions reverberated throughout the insectoid nest as both sides fought. Although the Jianghu cultivators were at a complete disadvantage in terms of quantity and quality, they were able to hold out thanks to a tight formation and a flexible set of skills. On the other hand, the Black Tortoise sect cultivators were immune to fear and pain just like the spirit beasts. They continued to attack like wild beasts even though their blood was spilled, and they took fatal wounds all over their bodies. It didn't matter though. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before they killed them all. What really concerned the group wasn't the overwhelming number of cultivators attacking their formation, but Niu Meng. The sect master hadn't attacked them like the rest of the Black Tortoise sect cultivators. Since sending Zhou Hai flying with an explosive kick, the man had simply stood where he was and watched them in silence. The man's vitality was as glaring as a lighthouse in the dead of the night. It was impossible to ignore him even if they tried. Zhou Hai unleashed a slash that sent a Black Tortoise sect cultivator's head flying across the air. The cultivator had not stopped attacking even after they had blasted away his limbs, but the decapitation caused him to stop moving entirely. The only way to kill them is to cut off their heads. He immediately yelled. The Black Tortoise sect cultivators were all controlled by a parasite. It was impossible to say if the cultivators were alive or dead, but the point was that they were immune to pain, and no amount of injury seemed good enough to stop them. The only way to end them once and for all was to cut off their heads. The group immediately redirected their attacks. Just a moment later, another Black Tortoise sect cultivator lost his head and collapsed lifelessly on the ground. It was at this moment Niu Meng finally made his move. The sect master charged forward with a speed that did not match his monstrously huge body at all, bowling over an unfortunate Black Tortoise sect cultivator who happened to be in his way in the process. Despite the interruption, he easily kicked one of the two body-tempering cultivators blocking in front of the group over his head, causing him to turn white as a sheet and spitting out a shower of blood. Even his shield spirit artifact turned dim and became covered in cracks. Having smashed open a gap in their defense line via brute force, Niu Meng proceeded to bend his leg back and launched a mighty kick at the 6th Order combat cultivator directly in front of him. Considering that the same kick had launched a body-tempering cultivator into the air a second ago, there was no way the man would survive if it landed. The combat cultivator wanted to dodge out of the way, but he just wasn't fast enough. Zhou Hai tried to interrupt the attack by landing a vertical slash right on top of the hoof, but the blade struck bone and let out what could only be described as a metallic clang. Right after that, bang! A shower of blood and gore struck everyone standing next to the combat cultivator. The man himself was nowhere to be seen. Niu Meng had literally exploded him with a single kick. Everyone's scalp tingled at the horrifying sight. That was about the most direct impression of the kick they could get without experiencing it with their own body. That was just the beginning of Niu Meng's assault, however. While ignoring the holes Zhou Hai was putting all over his body, the sect master reached out and grabbed another combat cultivator's head with a giant hand. Then he squeezed and popped the poor bastard's head like a watermelon. That was 2 people gone just like that. It was only then Niu Meng threw a swipe at Zhou Hai and knocked him away. One man had single-handedly destroyed their tight formation. Kitty Shen's eyes widened, and her blood turned ice cold. Niu Meng's eyes were locked on hers as he launched a kick at her. The young woman was only a 5th-order cultivator. There was no world she might survive if the kick so much as brushed against her skin. Chapter 475, Desperate Measures? Her life flashing before her eyes, Kitty Shen did everything in her power to save herself. She pulled her ribbon into a multi-layered barrier in front of her and channeled all of her spiritual power into it. Unfortunately, the gap between her cultivation level and Niu Meng's was just too wide. Not only did the spirit artifact lose its power instantly, Niu Meng's hoof continued to travel toward her as if her protective aura didn't exist. Her mind was on overdrive, but there was nothing she could do except watch death slowly approaching her. It was at this moment a fat man rammed her out of the way. He was none other than Pang Dehai. The despair in Kitty Shen's eyes morphed into shock as she sailed across the air. The last person she expected to save her, if at all, was a spell cultivator, even though Pang Dehai and the other spell cultivator were the only ones close enough to save her. It was because spell cultivators were notoriously fragile. He might be a 9th-order cultivator, but it was still incredibly unlikely that he would be able to survive Niu Meng's kick. There was a loud bang as the hoof smashed against spiritual power. All the fat on his body began rippling violently as his face flushed bright red in an instant. It was then something unexpected happened. Everyone was expecting the worst, but not only did the spell cultivator not explode into a shower of gore, he did not move an inch from his spot. Instead, the force of Niu Meng's kick was converted into a shockwave that knocked over everyone behind him. For a second, Niu Meng's hoof was trapped inside Pang Dehai's massive belly as if he had stepped into a swamp. Then, Pang Dehai let out a mighty roar, puffed up his belly, and actually sent the sect master flying across the air. As it turned out, Pang Dehai wasn't just a spell cultivator. An unimaginable amount of blood-red vitality churned out of his body and surrounded him in a layer of protective energy. It was such a jarring transformation they could almost believe that he was a different person altogether. "Take out the other cultivators while I keep him busy," Pang Dehai said quickly before launching himself into the air with both feet and ramming into Niu Meng. The man had never felt more awe-inspiring until now. Unfortunately, Niu Meng wasn't at a level where Pang Dehai could keep him busy all by himself. Despite his best efforts, the fat man was knocked back to the floor after just a series of exchanges. While climbing back to his feet and hissing in pain, he shouted, "Actually, please help me, Brother Zhou Hai. This bastard is too strong for me to handle alone." He then rushed Niu Meng again before the sect master could attack anyone else. Zhou Hai knew that Pang Dehai would never cry for help if it was even remotely possible for him to handle Niu Meng by himself. Not daring to waste even a second, he immediately broke out of the enemy's encirclement and slashed at Niu Meng. It was only then that they just barely managed to keep the sect master pinned. Although the enemy's strongest was kept busy for the moment, it took 2 of their strongest to do so. Not only that, 2 of their combat cultivators were dead, and their formation was in disarray. To say that their situation was bad would be an understatement. Nearly everyone was fighting multiple cultivators on their own. Lu Yi was currently fighting against 3 Black Tortoise sect cultivators, and if they were on the same cultivation level as him, he would have annihilated them in the blink of an eye. However, 2 of them were 5th-order cultivators, and the third was a 7th-order cultivator. If these cultivators were in full possession of their faculties, Lu Yi would be long dead already. Even so, Lu Yi had to spend most of his time running away from his attackers. The trade-off for losing their intelligence and the ability to execute even the simplest of skills was explosive power and speed. Like all the crazed spirit beasts they had fought until now, the cultivator's only goal was to tear all enemies into itsy-bitsy pieces. Lu Yi dodged an attack and landed a massive blow on his opponent's neck. However, it wasn't powerful enough to behead him outright. The price of that failure was his opponent catching his shoulder in a vice-like grip and digging into his flesh with his talons. Lu Yi managed to pull free, but not without losing his sleeves and a good chunk of the flesh on his shoulders. Blood immediately poured profusely out of his wounds. That wasn't all. The other two enemies leaped into the air and descended on his position like a pair of bloodthirsty hawks. Lu Yi hurriedly rolled on the floor and just barely dodged the assault. He was just climbing to his feet when he felt another blow flying toward his face. He hurriedly spun around, channeled a massive amount of vitality into his right arm, and slashed at the enemy. The skill didn't just kill his opponent, it cut him in half and splayed their blood and organs all across the floor. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to catch a breather. The other two Black Tortoise sect cultivators were already flanking him from both sides. On Lu Ye's shoulder, Amber growled menacingly as its vitality intermingled with Lu Ye's. Thanks to the beast imprint, the White Tiger's vitality was empowering Lu Ye's every move. Without the increased endurance and power, he might have succumbed to his opponents already. Lu Yi reversed his grip on the inviolable and swung it into a blur. His saber slashed and thrust from multiple angles so quickly that it was unthinkable that it was the action of a mere second-order cultivator. If there was one silver lining about the situation, it was that the desperation of the battle spurred his and Amber's vitality to merge faster than ever before. Lu Yi wasn't the only one who was pressed. Lan Zi was running and taking potshots at the Black Tortoise sect cultivators chasing after her. Kitty Shen was injured in the first place, and now her shirt was entirely drenched in blood. One of the body-tempering cultivators was lying motionless on the ground and probably dead, while the other was holding back 4 Black Tortoise sect cultivators as they tore chunks of flesh from his body with every swipe. Even Xia Qianqian and the Great Elder, 2 of the strongest cultivators in their group, weren't doing much better. They might be 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators, but so were their opponents. They were both fighting off a group of 8th and 9th Order cultivators each. As for Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai, one only needed to hear Pang Dehai's high-pitched screams to know that they were faring poorly. They might be able to pin down Yo Meng for the moment, but there was no chance they would be able to slay the bastard. This was literally the worst-case scenario. If nothing changed, then it was only a matter of time before they were destroyed one after another. Lu Yi was still desperately trying to escape his pursuers despite his earlier success. Considering his strength, skill, and foundation, he should have no problems handling 2 opponents at the same time. With proper planning and execution, he could even turn the tables and slay them both. The problem was that 2 more Black Tortoise sect cultivators had appeared out of nowhere and joined in the hunt. Now that he thought about it, they were probably the opponents of the body-tempering cultivator on the ground. He was just a second-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. How could he possibly fight 4 opponents at once when they were all multiple minor realms stronger than him? He did not hesitate to empower himself with Windwalk and run circles around the periphery of the insectoid nest. He was just delaying the inevitable, however. At this rate, it was only a matter of time before he and everyone else was overwhelmed. Realizing that the situation could not get any worse than it already was, Lu Yi finally decided that it was time to use the last resort. He pulled out an aquamarine orb from his storage bag. The orb was only the size of a longan, but it burned his skin the second he held it in his hand. Not only that, the Tree of Glyphs responded immediately by releasing a massive amount of gray smoke. This only happened when a deadly poison had invaded Lu Ye's body. The orb was none other than the omni-poison pill Hua Xi had gifted him, of course. Hua Xi had told him how to use it when she gave him the orb. All he needed to do was to inject it with spiritual power and tossed it on the ground. The orb was useless to him on the Spirit Creek battlefield because he was the apex predator of apex predators of that battlefield. But now, it was finally time to use it. Honestly, he did not know how effective it would be. After all, his opponents were all Cloud River Realm cultivators. He didn't think it would be completely useless, but there was a chance the effect would be mild enough that it wouldn't impact his enemy's combat capabilities. He did not have a choice though. It was that or dying and becoming into the puppet of the insectoids. He was well aware that his allies would be affected by the poison as well, but the situation couldn't get any worse than it already was. Plus, most cultivators carried some antidotes on their person at all times. Ideally, they could simply swallow a handful of antidotes and cure themselves. On the other hand, the Black Tortoise sect cultivators were just mindless beasts. There was no way they would know how to use an antidote, not to mention that they weren't carrying anything on their person. All in all, the omni-poison pill should benefit his side more than the enemy's. His mind made up, Lu Yi channeled his spiritual power into the orb. There was a soft pop before an unimaginable amount of poison gas flooded the entire chamber in an instant. The mist was so thick that it was almost solid. He could hold his fingers in front of his eyes and still not see a thing. It was even thicker than the mist that permeated the myriad poison forest. The omni-poison pill was the culmination of Hua Xi's own cultivation level. Naturally, it was several times more toxic than even the deadliest poison at the center of myriad poison forest. It was even more effective than normal since the insectoid nest was completely sealed. His allies were caught completely off guard by this turn of events. 1 second there was nothing, and the next their vision was completely blocked by the poisonous mist. Xia Qianqian sensed the changes within her body and cried out in alarm, "Watch out! Poison!" She then held her breath and channeled her spiritual power to keep out the poison. To everyone's shock, the poisonous mist that seemed to be everywhere was capable of corroding their protective aura. It easily entered their bodies and worsened their condition. It wasn't long before they started feeling lightheaded. Everyone except Lu Yi thought they were goners. They were already facing the worst-case scenario, but now they were poisoned as well. They were sure that they were going to die here. However, the group quickly discovered that they weren't the only ones who were poisoned. The Black Tortoise sect cultivators were facing the same problem. Their movements suddenly slowed dramatically, and their strength wasn't nearly as explosive as it was before. There was no time to waste. They hurriedly swallowed their antidotes and hastened its digestion with their spiritual power. It was only then that their symptoms lessened a little. They were Cloud River Realm cultivators. It was incredible that Hua Xi's omni-poison pill, something she had created as a Spirit Creek Realm cultivator, was effective even on their strongest, but the symptoms definitely weren't unmanageable. Meanwhile, Lu Yi discovered that the 4 Black Tortoise sect cultivators chasing after him suddenly slowed down drastically. Their auras had turned completely green as well. When he looked within himself, he discovered that the Tree of Glyphs was working overtime and consuming its fuel non-stop to purge the poison. I think I underestimated Hua Xi's omni-poison pill. He wondered if Hua Xi had more. Considering how potent the orb was, he would love to get his hands on more omni-poison pills. Chapter 476, The True Nucleus of Life. In the myriad poison forest, aboard Hua Xi was counting the omni-poison pills she had created in her room. 8, 9, 10. Hua Xi's cultivation method was different from everyone else's. Ever since she accepted the inheritance in full, she grew her strength by consuming and refining poison. That was why she stayed at the myriad poison forest. The poisonous fog here was basically an all-you-can-eat buffet, not to mention the countless poisonous flora and fauna that lived in these lands. However, her cultivation couldn't go higher after reaching Heaven 9, and ascending to the Cloud River realm now meant she would miss out on the myriad poison forest permanently unless she was willing to pay the contribution points to re-enter the Spirit Creek battlefield. That was why she had no choice but to reduce her cultivation level by creating omni-poison pills. Lu Yi thought that the omni-poison pill was just a trump card Hua Xi created to attack her enemies, but in reality it was the culmination of her cultivation. When she was done with the myriad poison forest, and she was ready to ascend to the Cloud River realm, she could simply reabsorb the omnipoison pills and convert them back into her cultivation. Every time Wuxia finished creating an omnipoison pill, her cultivation level would drop to Heaven 8. This was why the orb was so potent as to affect even a Cloud River realm cultivator. The good news was that they were all Cloud River realm cultivators. If they were at the Spirit Creek realm, then they would probably perish within seconds after being enveloped by the fog. Of all the cultivators present, Lu Yi was the only one who was completely immune to the poison. When he realized that the footsteps behind him had grown heavy and discombobulated, he abruptly spun around and charged toward the noise. The 4 Black Tortoise sect cultivators had pushed him so hard that all he could do was run. Now, it was finally time to fight back. He only ran a couple of steps when a pair of scarlet lights abruptly emerged from the fog. Without hesitation, Lu Yi wreathed his saber in flames and swung it where he thought the enemy's neck was. The attack was empowered by 2 sharp edges, and his vitality was joined with ambers. As a result, the attack was even faster and stronger than normal. There was a dull thud and a splashing sound when the attack connected. The scarlet light residing in the cultivator's pupils faded completely before it even hit the ground. As it turned out, the poison was incredibly effective against the Black Tortoise sect cultivators. They were mindless creatures who could only act according to their instinct in the first place, and the poison had slowed their reaction speed to a crawl. As a result, the cultivator Lu Yi had just killed was unable to respond to the attack in time. Not one to give up his momentum after seizing it, Lu Yi ran right into the middle of the enemy group, dodged all of their attacks, and beheaded yet another powerful foe. The headless corpse instantly lost all of its energy and collapsed limply on the floor. Lu Yi was about to extend his kill streak by 1 more when a heavy object collided into his side and pushed him at least 30 meters away from his original position. Kitty Shen's battlefield was right next to Lu Ye's, and she was currently wrapping her enemies with her ribbon and tossing them left and right. That was what had collided into Lu Yi earlier, an enemy cultivator she had tossed away with her ribbon. Kitty Shen's problem was that she was so affected by the poison that she was incapable of unleashing even half of her normal strength. Moreover, her spirit artifact was more suited for binding an enemy than killing them. As a result, she was unable to kill her attackers even though the poison affected them more than it affected her. It was at this moment she saw that she had accidentally hit Lu Yi with her attack. This gave her an idea, however. She flicked her wrist and caught an enemy cultivator with her ribbon instantly. Then, she tossed him in Lu Ye's direction. Lu Yi had just caught himself when he saw yet another body flying toward him. Realizing Kitty Shen's plan, he immediately brought down his saber and successfully decapitated the enemy. "Let's do this!" Lu Yi yelled while breaking into a run. Although they hadn't verbally communicated their plan, they knew exactly what the other person was thinking, almost as if their minds were connected. Kitty Shen tossed her ribbon at an enemy cultivator in Lu Ye's path and immobilized him completely, allowing the combat cultivator to decapitate with insulting ease. Without pause, he dashed past Kitty Shen and blocked an incoming attack that was directed at her head. The 2 cultivators passed each other again and again as they worked together to annihilate the attackers around them. From time to time, Kitty Shen would deliver a bound attacker right in front of Lu Yi like a gift. A moment later, Lu Yi stopped beside Kitty Shen and panted a little. The woman's complexion was unnaturally green, but her eyes were filled with deep relief as well. Just a moment ago, it looked like they would be overwhelmed by their attackers. Now, all their enemies were dead. There was no time to rest though. Together, they rushed toward the next closest battlefield. The next battlefield belonged to their surviving body-tempering cultivator. The last time Lu Yi saw him, he was fending off 4 cultivators by himself. The only reason he was still alive was because he was a powerful 7th-order cultivator. Right now, he was doing his best to block the enemy's frenzied assault with his shield spirit artifact. His skin and his aura were eerily green just like Kitty Shen. But unlike her, he was a durable body-tempering cultivator with a massive reservoir of vitality in his body. That was why his symptoms were a lot milder. Not only that, the headless body lying beside his feet suggested that he had taken out one of the attackers on his own. Even if Lu Yi and Cultivation hadn't come to his aid, he probably could have held out long enough to kill them all. Ribbon and saber danced through the air as Lu Yi and Cultivation hit the attackers from behind. The body-tempering cultivator did not hesitate to launch his counter-attack as well. A moment later, the Black Tortoise sect cultivators lay dead at their feet. Without pause, the trio moved to the next battlefield. Like a snowball that grew bigger and bigger as it rolled down a snowy hill, the group kept growing in size, and their enemies kept falling like flies. Finally, the scattered group was joined once more. Everyone looked like shit, and not just because the poison turned their auras and their skin as green as a plant. Not even the strongest among them, the Great Elder and Xia Qianqian, were able to avoid taking some injuries. Not only that, their symptoms were slowly but surely worsening over time. Although they had consumed an antidote, the poisonous mist was thinning at an excruciatingly slow rate because the insectoid nest was sealed. This meant that the poisonous mist had nowhere to go except into their bodies. This was why everyone, even their ninth-order cultivators, were having trouble resisting the poison. That said, the poisonous mist had cleared up enough that Xia Qianqian noticed something unusual. Everyone's aura and skin was as green as a plant because of the poison, but not Lu Yi. Not only did the young man look perfectly fine, even Amber was untouched by the poison, though that was because Lu Yi had protected it with his spiritual power this whole time. Xia Qianqian had been wondering who was the culprit behind the poisonous mist since it was conjured. At the beginning, she thought that it was caused by the Black Tortoise sect cultivators or the insectoids. It wasn't until she noticed that the poisonous mist was affecting her attackers as well that she realized she was mistaken. Now that she saw that Lu Yi was completely untouched by the poison, she had a feeling she knew exactly who the culprit was. It made sense that the one person who wasn't affected by the poison would be the poisoner himself, no? Technically speaking, Xia Qianqian should berate Lu Yi for his decision because it was a monstrous trump card that affected everyone except the poisoner himself. However, she could not deny that it was the right choice. Considering the earlier situation, they would have died one by one if nothing had changed. Sure, they weren't in the best condition right now, but they weren't going to drop dead in the short term either. Assuming that they survived this crisis, they would eventually recover from this ordeal. Meanwhile, Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai were still fighting against Niu Meng, the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect. The situation didn't look good though. One of Pang Dehai's arms was broken, and one of Zhou Hai's legs was bent in an unnatural manner. Even worse, Niu Meng looked as fresh as ever even though he was taking multiple hits by the second. The sect master was expressionless, but his violent, cruel eyes told a different story. His attacks were simple and practically monotonous, but there was so much force behind them that Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai felt like death was breathing down their necks the whole time. Technically speaking, they should be overwhelming Niu Meng because their cultivation levels were equal, and they outnumbered the sect master 2-1. He was also fighting mindlessly because he was being controlled by a parasite. In reality, the duo was just barely keeping Niu Meng at bay. Something clearly wasn't right about this. What concerned Lu Yi even more was the fact that Niu Meng looked completely unharmed. He was sure Niu Meng had taken a wound from Zhou Hai when he made his first move, so why? Lu Yi quickly figured out the answer. Zhou Hai was aiming at Niu Meng's arm and successfully scored a hit that penetrated all the way to the bone, but the wound had wriggled and healed in just a matter of seconds. It was such a stunning sight that no one could say a thing for a couple of seconds. It should not be possible for anyone at the Cloud River realm level to recover so quickly, and yet there was no denying the reality that happened right before their eyes. His life energy, Xia Qianqian suddenly blurted out in realization. He's the core of this nest. The true nucleus of life. Every insectoid nest contained a core. The easiest way to destroy a nest was to destroy the core not just because it was where most of the nest's life energy was concentrated, but also because it held the nucleus of life. So long as the core remained, the nest could theoretically produce an infinite amount of insectoids. Only by destroying the core could they wither the nest and destroy its ability to produce insectoids. Usually, the centermost flesh sac in the nest was the core. Since the nest hadn't withered even though Niu Meng had ripped open the flesh sack and stepped into the open, not to mention that he was overflowing with an impossible amount of life energy, it could only mean that he was the true core of the nest. Xia Qianqian's outburst hit everyone like a thunderbolt. The reason Niu Meng was overflowing with life energy was because he was the true core of the nest. No wonder the sect master had regenerated from his wounds instantly. The revelation wasn't something to be happy about, however. It meant that the only way to destroy the insectoid nest was to kill Niu Meng. They couldn't even escape because the nest was completely sealed. However, how could they kill an enemy that could regenerate from his wounds instantly? Besides decapitating the sect master, the only other way they could defeat him was to grind down his life energy bit by bit. There was a silver lining though. Niu Meng was just as green as the rest of them, meaning that he was poisoned as well. The fact that he felt a lot weaker than he was at the beginning of the fight was proof of that. They were all affected by the poison, but it looked like Niu Meng was affected harder than most. "I'm going in," the 7th Order Body Tempering Cultivator declared before joining Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai. The Great Elder was right behind him. No one else stepped forward because they weren't body tempering cultivators. Judging from the explosive power Niu Meng had displayed earlier, he could probably annihilate anyone who wasn't a body tempering cultivator in one hit. Not even a 9th Order cultivator was safe from him. For example, someone like Xia Qianqian might die in one hit because she was a frail spell cultivator. Chapter 477, You Should Have Said It Sooner. The battle continued. Zhou Hai, Pang Dehai, the Great Elder and the 7th Order Body Tempering Cultivator were just barely fighting Niu Meng to a standstill. The rest of them had spread out so they could attack Niu Meng with their spells and flying weapons from multiple directions as well. However, Niu Meng just had too much life energy. No matter how many wounds they left on his body, no matter how many times they staggered him, he would recover in the blink of an eye. If fast recovery was Niu Meng's only advantage, then they could have devised a way to deal with it a while ago. The problem was that Niu Meng was extraordinarily tough as well, not to mention that they were severely weakened due to the poison. As a result, they only managed to leave superficial wounds on his body most of the time. Not even Lu Yi, the only one who was completely unaffected by the poison, was able to cut deeper than 3 inches despite having empowered his flying weapons with 2 sharp edges. Out of all of them, Zhou Hai was the only one with enough strength to cut deep enough to expose the bones. It was useless though. Zhou Hai had tried multiple times to behead Niu Meng to no avail. While Niu Meng wasn't able to dodge his lightning-fast slashes, Zhou Hai was unable to cut off his head either. It was like a mortal attempting to cut not one, but multiple thick steel bars in one strike. It just wasn't possible. Their despair grew until it was almost palpable. They could not have anticipated that the final enemy would be so unreasonably powerful. Skill could overcome strength, but only if the gap wasn't too wide. Dragging out this fight wasn't an option either. Niu Meng would outlast them in every scenario because he had more life energy and toughness than all of them. There were multiple tyrants on the Spirit Creek battlefield. They were existences that were absolutely stronger than any single Spirit Creek realm cultivator. If Niu Meng was on the Cloud River battlefield, then he would qualify as a tyrant as well. And therein lay the problem. Niu Meng was a Cloud River realm tyrant. Normally, it would have taken at least a team of dozens to defeat him. As if that wasn't bad enough, he wasn't a normal tyrant either. He was also empowered by the life energy of an insectoid nest. Right now, everyone was feeling bitter and regretful. They would never have come here with such a small team if they knew that their final opponent would be a Cloud River realm tyrant. They would have gathered dozens, if not hundreds of fellow cultivators first. There was a loud bang and an outburst of spiritual power. It was the 7th Order Body Tempering Cultivator's shield spirit artifact shattering into pieces after taking a hit from Niu Meng. Out of all the people attacking Niu Meng at melee range, the Body Tempering Cultivator was easily the weakest. Niu Meng might be nothing more than a mindless beast right now, but even in this state he knew to tackle the weakest link first. The 7th Order Body Tempering Cultivator was sent flying like a rag doll. His entire body looked as red as a boiled prawn, and he sprayed out a mouthful of blood before crashing hard against the floor. He did not move after that. It was impossible to say if he was dead or just unconscious. The next person to be sent flying was Pang Dehai. The guy screamed the entire way. He was sent flying to the nearest flesh wall as if he was being subjected to the cruelest torture or something. He hit the wall so hard that he sank slightly into the flesh before slowly sliding toward the floor. The defense line that had been keeping Niu Meng at bay was broken. As the monstrously huge sect master sped into a blur, many yells erupted from multiple directions. "Watch out!" Zhou Hai gritted his teeth and attempted to interrupt the sect master's charge with a powerful slash, but it didn't work. The next moment, Niu Meng appeared beside Xia Qianqian and cast a dark shadow over the spell Cultivator. He did not react even though his back was being bombarded by all kinds of attacks. Xia Qianqian conjured a barrier with her spiritual power as quickly as she could. At the same time, she leaped away from Niu Meng. The sect master launched a mighty kick that shattered that barrier as easily as a person might pop a bubble. Xia Qianqian was sent spinning across the air like a top before she crashed heavily against the ground. Not done yet, he stretched out his hand as if he was reaching for something before suddenly appearing right next to Lu Yi. As it turned out, he was aiming to grab Lu Ye's head. Every hair on Lu Ye's body stood on end at that moment. Death wasn't breathing down his neck at this point. It was crushing him from all sides and squeezing his heart so hard it might pop at any moment. Instinctively, Lu Yi swung his saber at the approaching hand. All it did was cause a shower of sparks as metal clashed against metal like talons. Niu Meng tightened his grip around the inviolable's blade and pulled. At the same time, he threw a punch at Lu Ye's abdomen. The faint vibration Lu Yi felt on his skin long before the punch even reached him was all he needed to feel to know that he would die if it landed. He conjured protection immediately. Lu Yi had no idea if it would be enough to stop the attack, but it was the best defensive measure he could come up with. It was at this moment that a cultivator dashed in front of Lu Yi. He detonated his spiritual power at the same time he crossed his arms defensively. There was a loud bang before the figure slammed into Lu Yi. The duo rolled across the floor like tumbleweeds. It wasn't until Lu Yi had scrambled to his feet that he realized that the person who saved his life was the Great Elder. The Great Elder also climbed back to his feet, but he spat out a mouthful of blood as soon as his back straightened. His arms were shaking uncontrollably as well. Clearly, that wasn't an attack he would like to receive a second time. "We need to think of a way to damage his beast imprint, young master. Niu Meng is in his beast form right now. Only by damaging his beast imprint can we cancel his beast form and stand a chance at victory," the Great Elder said hurriedly. His advice hit them all like a lightning bolt. From the beginning, Lu Yi had been trying to figure out why Niu Meng was so powerful. Sure, he was the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect, but it didn't quite explain his physical strength and toughness, especially considering that he was being controlled by the parasite. At first, Lu Yi thought it was because he was empowered by the life energy of an entire insectoid nest. Now, he realized that it was only one of the reasons. It was also because Niu Meng was currently in his beast form. They should have realized it sooner. Niu Meng might look like a mutant cultivator, but he was a human through and through. The reason he didn't look like one was because he had merged with his chosen beast. Beast form was the greatest technique of a beast tamer of the myriad beasts domain. Lu Yi had learned of it while studying the life energy art and the beast pact art. The reason he hadn't used it was because neither he nor Amber had reached the necessary level yet. Not only did it take time to execute the technique, it could not be maintained for long because it drained a massive amount of energy and stamina from both the cultivator and the spirit beast. Lu Yi did not know why Niu Meng could maintain the technique indefinitely, but he did know that the technique could be cancelled. All they needed to do was to damage his beast imprint. Lu Yi looked up. Niu Meng had not been idle while he and the Great Elder were occupied. Kitty Shen was lying in a pool of her own blood. Lan Zi was leaning against the wall with her great swords lying limply by her side. Her aura was in shambles as well. Everyone in the chamber was injured to a certain degree except Niu Meng. He looked like a god as he stood there without so much as a scratch on his body. "Why didn't you?" A weak voice overflowing with annoyance and frustration came from the darkness. Say this sooner? Pang Dehai slowly stepped out of the darkness while panting like a dog and wiping away the fresh blood dripping from his lips. The fat man did not look good, right now. His hair was a complete mess, and there were bloodstains all over his body. If it wasn't for his eyes, they might have thought that he was out of the fight already. Pang Dehai knew that it wasn't really the Great Elder's fault. From the old man's perspective, they were all cultivators of the myriad beasts domain. Since this was a world dominated by beast tamers, they should be well aware of the beast imprint and its functions. However, they were Jiuzhou cultivators. Forget that beast imprints literally did not exist in Jiuzhou. The beast taming faction wasn't even a major cultivation faction. In fact, the beast taming faction was generally looked down upon because it was believed to be the home for unambitious failures and weaklings who would rather rely on their spirit beasts to grow stronger than work on their own bodies. It wasn't until today that they realized that a beast tamer could be this powerful. Pang Dehai's appearance immediately drew Niu Meng's attention. The monstrously huge man revealed a rare glimmer of humanity as he tilted his head, seemingly perplexed as to how the fat man was still able to stand after all the beating he had dished out. In response, Pang Dehai spat on the ground before grinning maliciously at Niu Meng. The fuck you're looking at? Come hit me. Niu Meng obliged. A blur later, he appeared in front of Pang Dehai and kicked once more. Pang Dehai roared as his vitality and spiritual power merged together to form a dazzling aura. Not only that, he abruptly grew a few inches taller and broader as well. But there was a dull thud as Pang Dehai shook like a leaf. The fabric behind his back exploded into pieces as a violent shockwave exited his back and slammed into the flesh wall behind him hard. At the same time, his massive belly trapped Niu Meng's feet firmly just like before. Is that, Pwack? Pang Dehai attempted to taunt Niu Meng, but could not finish before a jet of blood spilled through his lips. After attempting to withdraw his legs several times to no avail, Niu Meng abruptly threw a punch at Pang Dehai's face. Pang Dehai immediately raised his hand and caught Niu Meng's fist. At the same time, he pulled out a strange spirit artifact Lu Yi could not identify before transforming it into a rope and binding their hands together. Pang Dehai tried to repeat the trick when Niu Meng proceeded to punch with his left hand, but this time the sect master moved too fast for him to catch it. The punch landed squarely on his chest and elicited a strange yelp from him. As Niu Meng landed one successful punch after another, Pang Dehai screeched on top of his lungs, "Are you fucking dead or something, Zhou? I'm going to die if you don't act soon, you bastard." Suddenly, a piercing light emerged from the darkness and stabbed into Niu Meng's back like a bolt of lightning. It was Zhou finally launching his surprise attack. However, no matter how much spiritual power he injected into his sword, the blade just refused to go deeper after penetrating about half of its length. Meanwhile, Niu Meng was already responding to the threat by tightening his flesh and causing the affected area to become a lot denser than before. There was a brief standoff until Zhou sword exploded with light and penetrated another 2 inches, but that was all. His spirit artifact dimmed like a dying candle after that. "How useless can you be?" Pang Dehai roared in frustration. "I can't believe I'm actually going to die because of you." Suddenly, a man ran up to Zhou. It was none other than Lu Yi. The despairing Pang Dehai was so surprised by his appearance that he temporarily forgot his rant. Chapter 478 were not meant for each other. Lu Yi was just a second-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. It was unlikely he would be able to contribute anything to the situation. Lu Yi came to a stop right behind Zhou before crouching slightly. As he sucked in a small breath, his spiritual power churned, and his vitality merged even deeper with Amber's. The inviolable flashed as he held it in front of himself. At the same time, his right arm abruptly swelled like a balloon as vitality poured into it. At that moment, Zhou felt like someone was pressing a blade against his back. His senses were screaming for him to get out of the way. "Pull your sword," Lu Yi yelled. Without hesitation, Zhou did as he was told, crouched, and jumped to the side. The second Zhou Hai withdrew his sword, the surrounding flesh immediately started wriggling unnaturally. If Lu Yi waited even a second longer, the wound might just heal up before he could do anything. He did not wait. His arm blurred as he stabbed into the wound 5 times in a row. Combo was a blade technique to Lu Yi. If he could use combo with flash, then of course he could use it with other techniques as well. It was just a matter of application. Every time the inviolable plunged into Niu Meng's flesh, its blade would emit a brilliant light. It was because he had empowered the inviolable with 2 sharp edges. They granted the saber incredible sharpness and allowed Lu Yi to penetrate just a bit deeper with each successive stab. 4 stabs came and went in the blink of an eye. On the 5th stab, the saber finally pierced 3 inches out of Niu Meng's chest. Both Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai perked up when they saw this. Neither man had anticipated that Lu Yi, a mere second-order cultivator, was capable of executing such a powerful move. Unfortunately, they needed Lu Yi to do more. Niu Meng was still struggling, so it was clear that the stab wounds still wasn't enough to disrupt the integrity of the beast imprint on the sect master's chest. It wasn't like they hadn't left some injuries on his chest earlier, but they had all healed in a matter of seconds. If Lu Yi withdrew his saber now, then all their efforts would be for naught. Lu Yi was aware of this. That was why he applied Burster to the inviolable the instant it pierced through Niu Meng's chest. There was an outburst of spiritual power as countless skewers made of invisible energy exploded into existence. If his target was anyone else, the attack would have been enough to kill them 10 times over. However, Niu Meng only shuddered in place. He just had that much life energy and tenacity. Thankfully, Lu Yi had one more trick up his sleeves. He constructed an explosion next and successfully blasted a hole through Niu Meng's chest. There was no denying that the sect master of the Black Tortoise sect was ridiculously tough. Most ordinary attacks could only burn some skin off his flesh. However, Lu Yi had constructed the destructive glyphs inside his body. No matter how tough the sect master was, his internal organs could not possibly be as tough as his flesh and bone. Moo! Niu Meng had not said a word since he emerged from the flesh sack. This was the first time the mindless man who only knew how to kill his foes made a sound at all. Even as his viscera splattered messily across Pang Dehai's chest, everyone could sense his tremendous vitality suddenly falling into disarray. Following that disarray were clear signs of separation. That was all Lu Yi got to see before Niu Meng abruptly turned around and threw a punch at him. He immediately constructed protection, but the glyph shattered the instant it made contact with the fist. It felt like he had been punched by a mountain. The next thing Lu Yi knew, he was flying uncontrollably across the air before slamming back first into the flesh wall. He hung there for a good few seconds before slowly sliding to the ground. His head spun, and his insides churned like a tsunami. For a time, he couldn't even draw breath until the pain abated a little. By the time he recovered enough to realize that it probably wasn't a good idea to lie prone on the ground, at least a dozen breaths had passed since he took the hit. There were dark tendrils encroaching on his vision and threatening to overcome his consciousness completely, but there were just enough flares of spiritual power for him to see how the battle was going. The Great Elder and Pang Dehai were currently working together to pin down Niu Meng. Lu Ye's saber was still stuck inside the sect master's chest. On the other side, Zhou Hai was chasing after a spirit beast that looked like a Kuei Niu. It was mooing non-stop while desperately trying to dodge Zhou Hai's attacks. It worked. Lu Yi thought to himself and nearly blacked out again when relief washed over him. He had no doubt that the Kuei Niu was Niu Meng's chosen beast, meaning that Zhou Hai and his all-out attack ultimately succeeded in breaking Niu Meng's beast imprint after all. Without the beast imprint, it was impossible for Niu Meng to maintain his beast form. Of course, they could not rejoin either. Niu Meng was far more manageable now that he had lost his beast form. Although he was still overflowing with life energy, he wasn't that much stronger than a conventional 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator. In fact, he was far weaker than before because the poison was finally taking effect properly. Not far away, a woman shakily crawled to her feet and channeled a spell. She was none other than Xia Qianqian. She wasn't the only one who survived the onslaught. Kitty Shin, Lan Zi, and even the 7th Order body-tempering cultivator were still alive. They were all forcing themselves to stand despite their condition because they knew that victory was right within their grasp. It was time to give it their all. Unfortunately, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to participate in this final showdown in person. Although he had managed to construct protection in time, Niu Meng's final punch before he was separated from his chosen beast still hurt him badly. Every time he tried to move, his abdomen would hurt like someone was stabbing his insides. He was pretty sure it was because some bone fragments had gotten inside his internal organs. That didn't mean he was completely helpless, however. His weapon holder buzzed as 9 flying weapons whooshed into the air and attacked the Kuei Niu from multiple angles. The Kuei Niu's fate was sealed from the moment it became separated from Niu Meng. Even though it was as strong as a 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator, there was no way it could evade or withstand their combined attacks. Not even half an incense stick later, the spirit beast lay dead on the floor while a pool of blood slowly grew beneath it. Niu Meng was still struggling not because he was particularly strong, but because neither Pang Dehai nor the Great Elder lacked the ability to end him in one strike. No matter how many wounds they left on Niu Meng, the sect master was always able to recover thanks to his exuberant life energy. This stalemate continued until Zhou Hai finally reached them and launched a thunderous strike, causing Niu Meng to skid to a sudden stop. The next moment, his head flew into the air, and his headless corpse hit the floor with a resounding thud. The battlefield suddenly grew much quieter after that. For a time, the only noise that resounded in the insectoid nest was everyone's panting. Pang Dehai let out a string of curses before collapsing on his butt. This was easily the hardest and most exhausting fight he had ever fought since becoming a cultivator. If possible, he never wanted to experience another fight like this, especially if it required him to be a body-tempering cultivator again. The reason Pang Dehai mostly fought at the backlands even though he was also a body-tempering cultivator was because he was terribly afraid of pain. If the situation wasn't as desperate as it was, he would never have revealed his hidden abilities. Suddenly, a flash of light caught everyone's attention. It came from Niu Meng's headless corpse. Zhou Hai screamed, "Watch out!" and attempted to cut the golden light in half. However, the golden light managed to evade the attack before zipping toward the farthest edge of the battlefield, toward Lu Yi. Lu Yi had been focusing on his recuperation since Niu Meng was dead, and even if he hadn't, he couldn't possibly have anticipated that the battle wasn't over yet. He attempted to intercept the golden light with his 9 flying weapons, but it easily dodged them all before zooming out of view. The next thing he knew, he felt a pinprick of pain behind his neck. Lu Yi instinctively tried to slap it like a mosquito, but all he felt was a massive bump that definitely wasn't there a moment ago. At the same time, he felt something burrowing into his body and grabbing hold of his cervical spine. It was the parasite, the one that had been controlling Niu Meng all this time. From what they learned, the parasite that controlled the spirit beast or the cultivator would self-destruct if its host was killed. It was why the cultivators of the myriad beasts domain never found the true reason the spirit beasts went insane. In fact, the insectoids were so elusive that even the cultivators of Jianghu were unable to detect it until one of the parasites tried to take over Amber. Niu Meng was obviously controlled by a parasite as well, but it would seem that this particular parasite had unusual abilities. Not only was it gold in color, it was actually smart enough to leave its dead host and infect another. They had all relaxed their guards after the grueling battle. No one realized that the parasite controlling Niu Meng wasn't dead yet until it was too late. For a moment, Lu Yi tensed up as if he had been struck by a lightning bolt. At the same time, he felt a ridiculous amount of auras above their heads and millions more in a particular direction. It was where Bilandia was at. More information had poured into his head, but he wasn't able to make sense of it before his neck hurt, and the parasite in his neck let out a strange chirp. The next thing he knew, the parasite had burrowed out of his body. Golden light touched the edges of his vision once more, but this time it wasn't able to take flight before Lu Yi caught it in one smooth motion. He was wondering what he should do when shadows suddenly cast over his person. When he looked up and saw that everyone was looming over him with severe expressions, he hurriedly said, "Calm down. I'm fine," while showing off the parasite in his grip. Peng Dehai was the first to recover from his surprise and ask, "Why did it leave your body?" The rest of the group were puzzled as well. They had rushed over after seeing the parasite flying to Lu Yi and infecting him. They had thought that they might be forced to perform the detestable. No one expected the parasite to burrow out of Lu Ye's body, however. It made no sense considering its behavior until now. Right now, the parasite was struggling furiously to break out of Lu Ye's grip, but it seemed powerless without a host body to control. Lu Yi was pretty sure that even a low-level Spirit Creek Realm cultivator would be strong enough to hold it in place. "I don't know. Maybe we're not meant for each other?" Lu Yi gave an outrageous excuse. He knew exactly why the parasite had left his body, of course. The tree of glyphs had come alive the second it burrowed into his body and tried to control him. The tree of glyphs could purge even the pill poison in one's body, so why wouldn't it work on a body-controlling parasite? If the parasite was slower, it would have been burned to a crisp already. It must be said that the parasite was incredibly unlucky. It could have chosen to infect anyone else in the chamber, not to mention that Lu Yi was lying at the farthest corner of the chamber too. However, it still chose Lu Yi as its target for some reason, not that it could have averted its fate even if it had chosen anyone else. Chapter 479, 30,000 Battle Points. In a sense, this strange insectoid was completely harmless to cultivators without the ability to infect and control its host. Lu Yi looked down and examined the insectoid he had captured closely. He discovered that it looked almost the same as the cicada-like parasite he had extracted from amber before. The only difference was that it was gold in color, as if it was forged from actual gold. "Insectoid King," he muttered to himself. "Excuse me?" Zhou Hai asked with a frown. "This is the Insectoid King." No one seemed to get what he was talking about, the Ninth Order Cloud River Realm cultivators even less so. They had never encountered an Insectoid King, despite having experienced many hidden realms and fought even more insectoids in the Cloud River battlefield. They knew that the insectoids were monsters that only knew slaughter and destruction, but they didn't know there was such a thing as an Insectoid King until now. "How did you know that?" Xia Qianqian voiced her puzzlement. "I felt something during the short period it tried to control me." Lu Yi tried very hard to recall the memory before saying slowly, "You know, I believe Myriad Beast Domain would be saved if we killed it." That caught everyone's attention immediately. Zhou Hai asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Yi took a moment to process the information he received from the golden parasite before explaining, "None of the insectoids in the Myriad Beast Domain, except the Insectoid King, have a mind of their own. They are all being controlled by the Insectoid King. If it dies, then the rest of the insectoids will die with it. Their empty shells might still live inside the spirit beast bodies, but wouldn't affect their minds anymore." When the Insectoid King was inside his body, he had sensed a plethora of auras on the surface. They obviously belonged to the insectoids hiding inside the spirit beast bodies. He had also sensed millions and millions of life energies in the direction of Bilandia. The connection worked both ways. Lu Yi was pretty sure that Amber had sensed the Insectoid King back when an insectoid had tried to seize control of its body. "Are you absolutely sure that killing the Insectoid King would cause all other insectoids to cease functioning?" Kitty Shen asked uncertainly. She had been wondering how their diminished group was going to escape from the army of spirit beasts waiting for them outside, not to mention the ocean of spirit beasts assaulting Bilandia. Considering their condition, it seemed extremely unlikely that they would be able to make it out alive, much less save Bilandia and consequently the world. If what Lu Yi said was true though, then killing the Insectoid King would solve all of their problems. "Let's find out, shall we?" Lu Yi said before tightening his grip. The Insectoid King let out one final screech before popping like a balloon and spilling golden liquid all over the place. Lu Yi burned it all with his fire attribute spiritual power. As if on cue, the crazed spirit beasts on the surface suddenly stopped pawing at the earth and calmed down. The scarlet, crazed gleam in their eyes swiftly faded as well. The spirit beasts at the Black Tortoise sect weren't the only ones that had calmed down. At Bylandia, the despairing cultivators were moments away from making their last stand when the spirit beasts that were attacking them from every direction retreated like tidewater. The survivors slowly gathered together on the broken walls as they watched the retreating horde while basking in unadulterated relief and joy. No one knew why the spirit beasts had retreated suddenly. The Jianghu cultivators were the only ones who figured out that someone had probably solved the root of the problem. Back at the Black Tortoise sect, the group were currently trekking through the tunnels and making their way back to the surface. The insectoid nest had started withering as soon as Niumeng was dead, and the flesh wall that sealed the exit earlier was no exception. The group was desperate to leave the insectoid nest, not just because it was the source of many a trauma, but also because it was still covered in poisonous mist. No one was willing to linger in that heavens-forsaken place for even a second longer. They didn't dare to head back to the surface immediately though. Despite all the antidotes they had consumed, the poison was still eating away at their bodies. Their bodies were sore, their limbs felt weak, and their spiritual power was stuttering like there was rust inside their veins. At this rate, they would have to return to the Cloud River battlefield and find a medicine cultivator to cleanse all the toxins in their bodies properly. Otherwise, it was unlikely that they would recover quickly. In the darkened tunnels, Lu Yi was recuperating after consuming a healing pill. He had sent Yi away to scout the surface. Unlike the cultivators in Bylandia, they still did not know if Lu Ye's assumption was true. If he was wrong, then they were going to have to fight their way out. No one wanted to fight the spirit beasts if at all possible. Not only were they seriously hurt, they were unable to unleash even half of their strength due to the poison. Suddenly, Pang Dehai broke the silence with a low chuckle. "Hey guys. This is just a suggestion, but you should take a look at your identity passes." Judging from the delight in his voice, it must be good news. Everyone did as he said immediately. When Lu Yi checked his identity pass, he was shocked to find that his battle points had skyrocketed to almost 30,000. Since the heavens were the ones tallying the battle points, he could trust that he wasn't seeing things. At the beginning, Lu Yi had killed many spirit beasts with his wards at the valley. However, that battle had only earned him a little over 3,000 battle points. During the defense of Bylandia, his tally blew past the 5,000th mark, not just because he had killed a lot of spirit beasts, but also because he earned a sizable sum for repairing Howling Thunder. The trip to the Black Tortoise sect was worth 5 times that amount or almost 25,000 battle points. His contribution in Niumeng's death clearly made up the bulk of the reward. His killing of the Insectoid King must have given him a lot of battle points as well, not to mention the discovery of the hidden ability of this breed of insectoids. In any case, 30,000 battle points represented a massive amount of wealth to a second-order Cloud River realm cultivator like Lu Yi. If he remembered correctly, Bylandia's quartermaster department offered a gold amulet at the cheap price of 16,200 battle points. This meant that he almost had enough battle points to purchase 2 gold amulets in one go. He did not know how many battle points the others earned, but he could not imagine them earning less than him. The Ninth Order cultivators had been crucial in the slaying of Niumeng, and Zhou Hai and Pang Dehai even more so. Without Zhou Hai, they might not have had the strength to slay Niumeng even after he was separated from his chosen beast. As for Pang Dehai, he was the one who held Niumeng at bay and kept their casualties to a minimum. Now that he thought about it, Niumeng was worth almost 1 or even 200 battle points in total. The battle points were then split among the group based on their contribution. All the desperation and bitterness they had suffered while fighting against Niumeng transformed into pure joy in that moment. Not even the darkness could conceal the wide grins on everyone's faces. Unfortunately, only 8 of them had survived the trip. The battle against Niumeng was so dangerous that they lost half of their combat cultivators and 1 body-tempering cultivator. Not even the female ghost cultivator had lived until the end. Risk and reward were 2 sides of the same coin, and it was inevitable that a cultivator would encounter a life-threatening crisis once in a while. Suddenly, Pang Dehai exclaimed in surprise, Is it just me, or are we missing a head? Lu Yi looked around and discovered that he was right. He quickly realized that the missing person was none other than Lan Zi. The discovery surprised him a little. He thought he had hidden his intentions pretty well, but it would seem that the woman was smarter than he gave her credit for. She had left the group and hid herself long before he noticed her absence. In this cultivation world, Lu Yi had no problems playing the role the heavens had bestowed upon him and cooperating with Lan Zi, not that his intention mattered where the heavens were involved. Plus, the heavens had made her his attendant. The arrangement was more beneficial to him than it was to her no matter how he looked at it. However, Lu Yi had not forgotten for even a second that they were enemies. Back in the Spirit Creek battlefield, he had fought her to defend his title as the champion of the Scroll of Supremacy and just barely defeated her. Having experienced her strength and potential firsthand, he had no doubt she would grow to become a great threat to the Grand Sky Coalition in the future. That was why he had been waiting for a suitable opportunity to kill her this whole time. He was sure that Lan Zi had been thinking the same thing. The reason he hadn't acted on his thoughts wasn't just because that opportunity hadn't arrived, but also because he did not know everyone's affiliation besides Pang Dehai. If he tried to kill Lan Zi in front of the group, there was a high chance the attempt would end in failure. It was a different story now. Lan Zi was poisoned and much weaker than normal. Lu Yi was seriously injured, but he could unleash most of his strength because he wasn't poisoned. If he could find the right opening, he was fairly certain he would be able to kill Lan Zi in one strike. The others would try to interfere and save her, but Pang Dehai should be able to hold them off until the deed was done. He didn't think that Lan Zi would nip his plan in the bud. It was a shame, but there was nothing he could do about it. At the same time, he was impressed with the woman's decisiveness. She was clearly aware that she shouldn't get anywhere close to Lu Yi in her current condition. Lan Zi's disappearance didn't cause too many ripples. Even Pang Dehai, the guy who mentioned her disappearance in the first place, simply left the matter at that. Most of them were veterans who had survived in the Cloud River battlefield for a very, very long time. It was obvious to them that Lan Zi was hiding because she was wary of someone in the group. There was no need to say it out loud and sour the mood, not to mention that they weren't out of the woods yet. It was at this moment Lu Yi received a message from Yi. As he predicted, the spirit beasts above the Black Tortoise sect had left the area. She even observed a lone spirit beast for a moment and confirmed that it had indeed returned to normal. Lu Yi asked, "How do you leave a hidden realm like this?" Pang Dehai answered, "Normally, a divine opportunity column appears at a specific location if the crisis was resolved. In this case, I think the divine opportunity column will appear in Bylandia, though you'll have to search around a little to find it. Bylandia is a massive city after all." Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. "We didn't obtain the city lord's permission before leaving Bylandia. If what the Great Elder said is true, then we've probably been branded as traitors of humanity and barred from Bylandia forever." Pang Dehai chuckled. "That is why it's going to be slightly troublesome to return to Bylandia." The fat man didn't look panicked in the slightest though. He had probably experienced something similar in the past. "We can't not go back though. The quartermaster department is in Bylandia," Lu Yi groaned while rubbing his forehead. "It doesn't matter. If you want to exchange your battle points at the quartermaster department, that's okay. If you want to perform the transaction after returning to the Cloud River battlefield, that is fine as well." "Please explain." "Let me put it this way. Battle points are a currency that you can only earn from some hidden realms, and in a sense are even more valuable than contribution points. All you need to do is to access a divine opportunity column, connect to the Vault of Providence, and spend your battle points there. By the way, you should know that battle points can be exchanged for anything contribution points can, but not vice versa. The amulets are one such example. It's because everything you exchanged really comes from the Vault of Providence, from the heavens themselves." Lu Yi tipped his head gratefully at Pang Dehai. He could appreciate the convenience of the setup if nothing else. It also made him realize how incredible the heavens were all over again. Chapter 480, Returning to Bylandia? Everyone focused on healing their injuries after that short talk. Xia Qianqian was a second-rate medicine cultivator, so they flocked to her like chicks to a mother hen as a matter of course. Considering their health condition and less than stellar environment, she could be the worst medicine cultivator in the world, and they still would have cherished her like gold. 3 days later, the group finally recovered enough to return to the surface. It was time. Lu Yi led the way just like last time. They were able to make it all the way to the collapsed well without any problem. It took a while to move the rocks out of the way, but they cleared a path eventually. A moment later, Lu Yi flew out of the well and squinted at the glaring sunlight for a bit. After living in darkness for so long, he almost felt like he was reborn. The others wore happy expressions as well. The group wasn't too wary because they had already asked their acquaintances about the situation on the surface a few days ago. They knew that the spirit beasts showed no signs of devolving back into insanity, and that the crisis plaguing the myriad beasts domain was truly resolved. Naturally, there wasn't much to be wary about. "Young master, great elder." A familiar voice entered his ears. Lu Yi turned around and saw the cultivators of the myriad beasts sect. 3 days ago, the group had split up into 2 teams in order to handle the situation. Lu Ye's group was responsible for ending the threat, while the old woman's group was responsible for leading some of the spirit beasts away. He had not heard from them for the past 3 days. It would seem that they had been waiting for them to resurface all this time. Ironically, Lu Yi still had no idea who the old woman was in the myriad beasts sect. She had to be someone important though. She was a 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator after all. After exchanging pleasantries for a bit, the Great Elder said, "Now that the crisis is resolved, it is time to go home, young master. Let us rebuild the myriad beasts sect to what it was before." The old woman and the rest of the myriad beasts sect cultivators urged as well, "Please come back with us to restore the myriad beasts sect, young master." Honestly, Lu Yi had almost forgotten about his identity in this world. But of course, he couldn't possibly comply with their request. Forget that this cultivation world probably wasn't real, he was ultimately a Jianghu cultivator. He turned to Pang Dehai for help, but the fat man immediately looked away and pretended to admire the scenery. It wasn't because he didn't want to help Lu Yi, but because he did not have any useful experience to share. He had never received such an important identity from the heavens when entering a hidden realm like this, much less been pleaded by a native to stay and restore their sect. How would that even work? In the end, Lu Yi had no choice but to say, "Please return to the sect first, everyone. I promise I will come home as soon as my friends and I are done with our business." The Great Elder immediately offered, "I'll come with you." But Lu Yi hurriedly waved him off. "It's fine, Great Elder. Please head back with the others." The Great Elder wanted to argue, but he changed his mind after the old woman shot him a look. "Very well. Do be careful, young master." He then looked at Xia Qianqian and Kitty Shen and ordered coldly, "You two best keep the young master safe. You will answer to me if even a hair on his person is harmed, understand?" The 2 women reluctantly responded, "Yes, Great Elder." The Great Elder fussed over Lu Yi a while longer before he finally joined the Myriad Beasts sect group and left. It wasn't long before they disappeared into the horizon. Lu Yi looked troubled as he asked, "Will they wait for me forever if I do not return to the Myriad Beasts sect?" Pang Dehai chuckled. "Don't worry. The heavens will know what to do." Suddenly, Lu Yi felt a sudden pain behind his head. He turned around and saw Xia Qianqian holding a hair between her fingers. She had obviously plucked it from his head earlier. "What the heck are you doing?" Xia Qianqian harumphed. "Oh my heavens, you lost a hair, young master. Grow it back now, or the Great Elder will surely put us through the mill." The Great Elder's rebuke had annoyed her. That was why she had purposely plucked a hair from Lu Ye's head. Lu Yi could not even be bothered to respond to her childish action. "Let's go," Zhou Hai beckoned before bringing out his flying sword. He then leaped on the sword and flew in the direction of Bilandia at high speed. Everyone else followed closely behind him. They didn't encounter any trouble on the way, just like when they first came to the Black Tortoise sect. Unfortunately, the same could be said for the damage that had already been done to the world. Still, this was not the end, but a new beginning. Lu Yi did not know if this cultivation world had already been destroyed in the past. He did not know if Xia Qianqian was right about their experience in this hidden realm being an extremely realistic reenactment of the past either. He could only say that it felt real to him. The spirit beasts had withdrawn and returned to normal. Bylandia had been saved from destruction. The humanity of the myriad beasts domain had survived, and there were even people waiting for him to come home and restore their sect to their former glory. They were about midway to Bylandia when Lu Yi asked suddenly, "Theoretically speaking, it should be possible to stay here forever, right?" "Theoretically? Sure. Have you ever seen anyone choosing to stay permanently in the Spirit Creek battlefield though?" Xia Qianqian countered next to him. To cultivate was to go forward constantly, to climb ever higher to reach that elusive peak. While it was inevitable that they would go through experiences they would remember for a lifetime, some cultivators might even choose to retire because of those experiences. What kind of cultivator would choose to linger in a hidden realm for a lifetime? Take Lu Yi for example. At first glance, it seemed like joining the Myriad Beasts sect cultivators and rebuilding the sect was a good choice. If nothing else, he was guaranteed a life of comfort, fame, and glory, or was he? The Myriad Beasts domain used to be dominated by beast tamers until the insectoids came and destroyed most of them. In fact, the entire cultivation world except Bylandia was practically destroyed. Now that the crisis was resolved, Bylandia had transformed from the final bastion of humanity to the only pillar left in the Myriad Beasts domain. Naturally, they weren't going to allow the beast tamers to return to power, if only to prevent history from repeating himself. Even if that wasn't the case, Lu Yi had a feeling that the ruler of Bylandia, Lu Wuzhai, wasn't going to let things go. He had only met the man once, but he could already tell that he was a power-hungry, bigoted bastard. Not only that, he was easily the biggest winner of this insectoid attack, and he didn't even need to lift a finger to reap the rewards. Right now, he was indubitably the new ruler of this cultivation world. If he really chose to stay in the Myriad Beasts domain, chances were he and the Myriad Beasts sect would be hunted like rats throughout the world. At the very least, the Myriad Beasts sect was facing an uphill battle. The group descended on a plot of land 5 kilometers away from Bylandia. They did not go further because they weren't sure what Bylandia thought of them at the moment. They might have saved the world, but they had also abandoned their posts at a critical moment. From Bylandia's perspective, they would be in the right to call them deserters. Plus, who would believe that they were the ones who solved the root of the problem and saved the world? Not to mention that the only person in Bylandia who knew about their plan was the city lord himself, Lu Wuzhai. If they went in without thinking, there was a high chance they would be attacked on sight. That could only end poorly for them. Everyone in the group silently stared at Lu Yi. It was clear they wanted him to infiltrate the city. Their group had 2 ghost cultivators at the beginning, but one had become separated from them while they were escaping Bylandia, and another had died in the insectoid nest. Since Lu Yi was the only one left who could emulate a ghost cultivator's abilities, of course it was up to him to infiltrate the city. Not one to shrink from his responsibilities, Lu Yi said easily, "Give me a moment." A while later, Lu Yi stopped in front of the city gate. No one stopped him because he was invisible right now. While staring at the dozen of familiar faces on the notice board, he thought calmly to himself, "I knew it. Bylandia really put a bounty on our heads." In fact, the portraits of every Myriad Beast sect cultivator, including himself, was hung at the most conspicuous spot. He could be wrong, but he had a feeling that Bylandia might not have put a bounty on their heads if the Myriad Beasts sect wasn't part of the desertion. The situation was pretty desperate. But since they were, of course Lu Wuzhai wasn't going to let the opportunity pass. The old bastard wanted them as far away from his city as possible. He would be even happier if they were all dead. Unfortunately, this meant that flying into the city wasn't an option. Bylandia's cultivators were sure to attack them if they tried. They would have to walk through the city gates. Hopefully, the others carried some concealment talisman papers with them. Many parts of the city were damaged or ruined, and it had only been 3 days since the assault had ended. It was unlikely that Bylandia's cultivators had already re-established their protective wards, so slipping into the city using concealment talisman papers now was still an option. It wouldn't be when Bylandia had restored all of its wards. Lu Yi messaged Xia Qianqian and told her about the situation. The spell cultivator quickly replied asking him to find the divine opportunity column first. Lu Yi was going to do so even if she hadn't said so. The divine opportunity column was their ticket back to the Cloud River battlefield after all. However, Xia Qianqian did not ask him to procure some concealment talisman papers for the group, probably because they already had them or something similar. Practically every cultivator would prepare a number of useful talismans no matter what cultivation level they were at. It was better to be safe than sorry after all. Lu Yi carefully made his way across the city after slipping through the entrance. Since he was invisible, he had to dodge an incoming pedestrian from time to time. I wonder where the divine opportunity column is? I hope I don't have to explore the whole city to find it. He was still thinking when he heard a pedestrian saying, "Are you heading back, fellow cultivator's son?" Another person answered, "Yeah. I mean, I survived this hidden realm and even earned some battle points at the end of it. I'm going to exchange them for some amulets and hopefully improve my cultivation to the next minor realm." "You have my congratulations." "What about you, fellow cultivator you?" The cultivator named Yu said, "I'm going to stay just a little longer." The cultivator named Sun asked in puzzlement, "The crisis is resolved, and killing the spirit beasts doesn't yield battle points anymore. What could possibly entice you to remain in this hidden realm?" The cultivator named Yun chuckled. "To tell you the truth, I'm also a beast tamer." The cultivator named Sun let out an ah of realization. "I see. You're hoping to acquire their secret art. It won't be easy though." Most of the beast-taming sects in Myriad Beasts domain are destroyed. It will not be easy to find them. Where there's a will, there's a way. I wish you the best, fellow cultivator. The two of them conversed a little while longer before finally parting ways. Lu Yi stopped in his tracks and thought for a few seconds. When the cultivator named Yu passed by his location, he said, "You may find what you need if you travel to the headquarters of the Myriad Beasts sect, fellow cultivator." "Who is it?" The cultivator named Yun turned toward the source of the voice in surprise, but of course he saw no one at all. After advising fellow cultivator Yun, Lu Yi immediately raced after fellow cultivator Sun until he caught up with him. It was because fellow cultivator Sun was heading back to the Cloud River battlefield, meaning that he must know where the divine opportunity column was. Unfortunately for the Great Elder and the other Myriad Beasts sect cultivators, they were probably never going to see him again. Still, the way of beast taming of this world should not decline into obscurity or even extinction just because of one crisis. As long as the Myriad Beasts sect and the remnants of the beast-taming sects were still alive, they should be able to keep the way of beast-taming alive. If nothing else, the cultivators of Jianghu will be able to visit this hidden realm to study the essence of beast-taming and bring it back to Jianghu. He spent the next period of time following fellow cultivator Sun all the way to the quartermaster department. He immediately saw the divine opportunity column when he entered the main hall. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.